The Decepticons were in search of the Allspark, and Megatron was determined to find a power that was so strong he could finally defeat Optimus Prime and take the Matrix of leadership and the Allspark from the Autobots before eliminating them. While searching, Megatron picked up a signal from a Cybertronian outpost. The message, although slightly distorted, had a Decepticon soldier mentioning a strange organic creature that was attacking the outpost, and it had taken over control of one of the Decepticons, increasing its power to an unimaginable scale. Upon hearing this, Megatron orders Soundwave to set a course, as this could be the power he needs to finally turn the tide in the war for Cybertron against Prime and the Autobots. Upon landing at the Decepticon outpost, Megatron, Soundwave and Shockwave head out to see what had decimated the outpost. Shockwave wanted to examine the organic for his experiments. As they approached the outpost, which looked like it had been in a battle that had beaten all the battles recorded in Cybertronian history, Megatron smiled in almost pure delight at the destruction in front of him, as he knew if he could take this power and make it his own, he would become almost unstoppable. Megatron ordered Soundwave to send out Razorbeak to try and locate the organic that had caused all of this destruction. At the same time, Shockwave initiated a scan, walked towards the creature and interrogate it, wanting to learn more about the secret of its power and how to claim it for himself. "What manner of creature are you, and how did you take over this Decepticon warrior?" demanded Megatron. The creature, still in pain, said, "We are Venom, and this host is compatible with our needs for now." Megatron repeated his demand to the creature. "What manner of creature are you, Venom?" Shockwave then spoke. "Lord Megatron, my analysis has discovered that this creature is a symbiotic organism that appears to take over its host, increasing the abilities while taking over its mind. As it obviously seems to be hurt by acoustic blasts of this frequency, increasing the frequency may allow us to remove the creature from the host for further examination, but too high a frequency may kill it." Upon hearing this, a smile appeared on Megatron's face. The smile was so sinister that for a moment you could see even Venom's face showed the slightest hint of fear. "Soundwave," commanded Megatron, "increase the frequency. I want this creature captured in order to examine it further. But bear this in mind, I want this Venom organic alive to make its power my own. Do not fail me or I'll turn you into scrap metal. Am I making myself clear?" "Affirmative," replied Soundwave, as he increased the sonic bombardment, forcing the symbiote to be ripped off the Decepticon warrior, leaving the original host in its original form. Now, this was suggested by one of the subscribers, Gwyneth, and I quite like the concept. It's a crossover between Marvel and the Transformers. I know they've done crossovers like the Terminators and Transformers, and I quite like the idea of bringing the Venom symbiotes into the Transformer universe. I've done some Venomized Transformers, Autobots and Decepticons on the channel, so this was kind of like the next step. I also wanted to add some lore to this one, and I hope you guys like the fact that I've had lore in the last couple of episodes, trying to make things a bit more interesting and create my own world, as it were. A channel I view regularly, Popcross Studios, adds lure to the kind of like mix and mashups he does, and I really enjoy it, so I thought I'd finally give it a go. I'm not very good at this, but I hope to get better as time goes on. Anyway, I hope you like how this illustration of Venom versus Soundwave turned out. Let me know in the comments below. While in space, Megatron and the Decepticons have captured a Clintar symbiote, aka Venom. However, on Earth, unbeknown to the Autobots and the majority of the world's population, more of the Clintar species were arriving, as if by some type of calling. Dr. Louise Lincoln, aka Killer Frost, was on a mission with the rest of the Suicide Squad members when she came across a strange organic creature in a lab they were stealing data from. Her curiosity and slightly twisted killer instinct got the best of her, and she decided that it would be a fun way to pass the boredom of the mission to freeze the strange creature before her. This would be her mistake. As she froze the container, the symbiote broke free, smashing through the glass and started to cover her and bond with her DNA. Killer Frost quickly decided to freeze the symbiote as it wrapped around her. At first, it appeared to be working, but as parts of the organism froze and crumbled off her, the creature began to become immune, or at least adapt and mimic her powers. And as quickly as Killer Frost was freezing the symbiote, it was unfreezing itself while continuing to merge with its new host. As the symbiote was merging with Killer Frost, she caught glimpses of its memory and could see that several more of these creatures, known as Clintars, have landed in Gotham from the meteor shower that happened a couple nights prior. Killer Frost wondered who else could have come across one of these strange creatures. Now, for this illustration, I wanted to do a few things I don't normally do. The first, I wanted to push myself with the character design and the colouring and the rendering. So I wanted to go back to a bit more of an anime style, which I haven't done in a while. And for the character design, I also thought it'd be a cool idea to give her a bit more of a seductive and alluring pose. So kind of put the hand and the fingers towards the mouth and the face and just put a bit side on. I also wanted to make the symbiote a bit more refined and sleeker to match with the feminine form of the character. So instead of the previous episodes where I've made the symbiote kind of like come out in more places and have more elements to it, wrapping and a bit more complex, I wanted to keep more of a kind of like a sleeker feel and just a few strands coming out. But I did add a bit of texture on top of the symbiote to make it kind of have a bit of a life of its own. I'm really pleased with how the Venomized version of Killer Frost came out, and the lighting and composition do help with that. I quite like the background, the blend from the cool blues to the warm colours where the light's coming from that help Killer Frost stand out a bit more. And I do like my choice of making the symbiote a blue colour to kind of like replicate the ice powers of Killer Frost. As we know, symbiotes can take on the abilities of the host they take over. So this symbiote will forever have the abilities of Killer Frost, aka freezing things and control over ice. I hope you enjoy how Killer Frost came out. Let me know in the comments below, and enjoy the rest of the process of bringing this illustration to life. While roaming Gotham Park and helping the plants and flora to grow, Poison Ivy spotted a meteor shower in the night sky above Gotham. As a fragment came crashing down to the far side of Gotham Park and caused a massive explosion, Ivy rushed over to that side, trying to save the local fauna that was being ravaged by flames and damaged by the crater left from the meteor's landing. After using her powers to put the flames out and help the flora regrow, Ivy went to the space rock that was left in the crater and decided to crush it in anger. She lifted her arm and a giant vine grew out of the ground. With a swing of her arm, the vine came crashing down on the meteor, smashing it to pieces. As Ivy walked over to see the smashed meteor, a black ooze-like substance shot out at her and started to stick all over her body, fusing with her DNA. Once the Clintar had fused fully with Poison Ivy, it turned from black to a reddish purple pinkish colour and seemed to be able to not only create an army of vines and living plants like Ivy could, but these creatures were also slightly mutated and kind of looked like symbiotes of their own. It appeared that part of the symbiote's DNA had fused with the local plant fauna through Ivy's powers. They also had the ability to shoot seeds that fused with living creatures and kind of turned them into remote controlled toys, as it were. Now for that, I kind of like Ivy's got the ability to set up pheromones to control men, so I thought it'd be quite cool with the symbiote being able to shoot seeds to control creatures. Now for this, I wanted to have Ivy in a type of seductive pose, and I haven't had much practice drawing characters in poses where they're sat down or led down. But I'm really pleased with how this came out. Again, the symbiote is to have a smooth and kind of like, almost like a silky effect to it, but as well as the texture. And I think the painting style works well that I'm doing at the moment. It kind of has a nice contrast to that of Killer Frost with the more warmer colours and sort of like the warm plant background. But I did want to incorporate some of the blues and purples in because it gives a nice contrast between the plant that Ivy sat on and the actual Venom symbiote or Clintar symbiote's purpley red colours. And I think it works well for the colour designs. And it's a nice contrast. And you'll see later on in the video when the side by side, they help stand out quite well. But I hope you guys enjoy how Poison Ivy Venomized turned out. Now, the last DC bad girl that we're venomizing had to be Harley Quinn. Dr. Harleen Quinzel, aka Harley Quinn, the clown princess of crime, was out causing mischief and mayhem with her beloved baseball bat while on an errand for the Joker, Mr. J. When she saw the meteor shower in the sky, ooh, she thought, I really shouldn't, as Mr. J wants me to do this errand. But those look awfully nice. Ah, what the hell, she said. What Mr. J don't know won't hurt him. With that, Harley decided she would climb to the rooftop to get a better view of the meteors in the night sky above Gotham. As she started to stare at the meteors and she followed one going overhead, she looked behind her to watch them hurtling through the sky. Suddenly, a loud crackling noise like a fireplace could be heard getting louder and louder. Harley turned around and saw one of the meteors heading right at her. Ah, geez, Mr. J ain't going to be happy. And with that, the meteor slammed into Harley, sending her flying along with it into the buildings behind her, with a massive bang and a shockwave that brought down the building. The next thing Harley knew was she was standing unharmed beside the destroyed building, covered in a strange organic outfit, though to Harley, she thought nothing of it. And as it changed back into her normal crazy self, she picked up a baseball bat and merely skipped away to finish a task for Mr. J. Now, I wanted to kind of do a story that kind of met with Harley's crazy personality. She hangs around with the Joker and she's up to mischief and chaotic antics all the time. So I thought, a symbiote on her is not really going to phase her for more than a few seconds, and she'll just continue as normal and suddenly pull the symbiote out at some point later on, and I'll work that into the story and it'll just be a bit comical and classic Harley. I also wanted to do the design more from Suicide Squad on this than the original Harley Quinn design. I just think the contrast of colours are a lot better and it'll be a lot more fun for the symbiote style to merge with the more recent Suicide Squad movie version of Harley. And I had to do her in her newly iconic Daddy's Little Monster outfit with a baseball bat. And it was hard because I did like the mallet and hammer from the classic version, but I thought the baseball bat would be more appropriate. I wanted to do a bit more of a, kind of like a striking, but more of a powerful yet slightly dynamic pose with her. Again, you'll see the illustration, I wanted to keep the style consistent, so it's a bit of an anime style and it's a bit of a painting style, so it will have this quite nice textured effect to it. The process is different to my normal process, and if any of you guys want me to do a more in-depth video on how I did the process for the colours on these characters, let me know in the comments below. And again, I wanted to show a bit more of the feminine side of symbiote. I've kind of, even though I've used them with like Raven and Starfire before, I didn't really emphasize the character a bit more, and with these illustrations where they're solely a character, I want to kind of push myself a bit more, but at the same time make them appealing and give a bit more life to them. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoy how Harley Quinn turns out. Optimus Prime was scouting a location on Earth for the Allspark when a strange-looking creature could be seen heading towards him. Optimus took caution and stood ready to fight if he had to, but he was also a bit more curious about what the creature was. It didn't look like any life form on Earth, or at least anything in Teletran 1's databank since the Autobots landed on Earth. Optimus raised his energy axe, and the creature stopped in its tracks and began to speak. "Don't shoot! I'm not here to fight you. I wish to speak to you." "Who are you?" said Optimus. "You do not appear to be part of this planet's native life forms." "I'm a Clintar," the creature said. "I came from a race of symbiotic organisms, and I've temporarily joined with this creature in order to come to speak to you. Like many species in the universe, my race has good and bad members, and a group of these bad Clintars are obsessed with power and taking over life on this planet and destroying the native species. I've joined and taken over this creature to explain to you that they've taken over some of the worst villains on this planet, and as well as taking over the species, they want to turn many of them into a food source." "Why are you telling me this?" asked Optimus. "I wish for myself and my comrades who are trying to stop this invasion to fuse with you and your fellow Autobots, as well as the heroes of this world. We can increase your abilities as well as level the playing field when facing other members of my species. In return, we can increase your strength and give you new abilities, and our weaknesses as Clintar can be reduced or removed, making this a mutual agreement for both of us. We will all work with you heroes, and we won't take control of you unlike our brethren have done with the villains. What will this union entail, and will it only be until the threat to this planet has been removed?" replied Optimus. "Let me show you, and you will see much more clearly." With that, a symbiote left the creature it was bonded to and began to wrap around Optimus, fusing with him and sharing its intentions as well as its memories as they became one combined being. Now, for this, I tried to imagine how Optimus Prime would have reacted to a Clintar, and Optimus is quite noble. He's a Prime. They tend to want to be diplomatic and not fight if they have to, but they're always ready to fight. And the only way I could think that a Clintar would be able to bond with a Prime, other than to completely catch him off guard and ambush him, would be to negotiate or go the diplomatic route to speak to him and then try to bond with Prime at this point. Now, I thought this was a cool way, not only to show a way of building trust between the two, but I thought a really cool possible storyline that may develop. I mean, this is going to depend on how the story goes. I'm not quite decided on this, but the Clintar seem to have the ability to take over relatively strong to weak-willed individuals and control them. This was seen within the Spider-Man series when Venom was first introduced and Spider-Man came in the black Spider-Man suit costume, and it slowly started to make him more aggressive. I wanted to leave this open because while it's sharing the memories, is the Clintar sharing the memories that it wants Prime to see? Or is it actually showing its true intentions and the actual memories? And I thought this would be quite a nice little bit of suspense in the story arc of this Venomverse Transformer multiverse colliding crossover as it unravels. Now for this, I wanted to keep the theme to the original Generation 1 Optimus Prime. As I've said before on the channel, I'm a big fan of the Generation 1 Autobots and the original Transformers animated movie. And I think because of its simple design, it works great. I also think it's got a bit of a special place to me because it's the first Transformers series I ever watched growing up, and I absolutely loved it. But some of the newer versions are quite good in the films and some of the anime, so check them out. But I really wanted to push myself in this illustration, so I wanted to push the colours, push the techniques I'd learned from the last DC villain's Venomized video, which is the last story and lure for this sort of like saga that's going on that I did on the channel. And I want to take what I learned from the Kefler illustration as well, and kind of like fuse everything I've learned and built on the channel over time into this illustration. Instead of doing the usual 3 to 4 on the channel, I've decided lately to focus on one illustration and show a bit of better quality. There will be some videos where I'll show 3 or 4 characters and they'll be roughly to this quality, but let me know what you guys think. I'm keen to find out if you guys prefer a longer video with the single illustrations or multiple illustrations in a video. I'm happy to do both, but if one favors the other, I'm also happy to do a bit more of that on the channel. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the process of bringing a Venomized Optimus Prime to life. Jennifer Walters, better known by her superhero name She-Hulk, was out in the desert near the town of Vista Verde, birthplace of the Hulk. She was exploring rumours of a strange creature in the desert, causing the local wildlife to change their behaviour and their shape, and act strangely. The other agents of Smash were out dealing with an issue in the Savage Land, leaving She-Hulk to investigate what was happening on her own. As she travelled across the desert, she got a glimpse of something shining in the distance. She leapt with an amazing leap and landed by what appeared to be a giant robot with a strange substance wrapping around it. She-Hulk didn't know what to do. This was the first time she'd encountered anything like this. She's been into space and seen wondrous things, but nothing like this on Earth. Just as she was about to shout out to see if the robot would answer her or respond, a piece of the substance separated and shot towards her. She-Hulk went to hit the substance away, thinking nothing of it. She's a Hulk, smashing's natural to her. But as she hit it, the substance wrapped around her hand and started to spread up her arm and over her body. Although the substance was trying to bond with She-Hulk, her gamma-infused cells were fighting it off, or rather, slowing down the takeover of the symbiote with the host. Several hours passed, and eventually the sun starts to set and the symbiote finally manages to take over She-Hulk. Though, throughout the merging process, the symbiote shared its memories and She-Hulk remained herself and learned about the mission the symbiote was on, and also learned that the giant robot was the leader of the Autobots, Optimus Prime, which before this point she didn't even know Transformers existed on Earth. Now, for this one, I wanted to take She-Hulk and have her in a kind of fighting pose. It's more dynamic, and I thought it would be a cool idea to take the suggestion of drawing She-Hulk in this new style and add her to the Venom universe to add more MCU characters into it, where we've had DC characters previously and even the Transformers and Decepticons, as well as eventually down the line maybe some Pokemon. And I thought that as this channel's been developing this story, it would be nice to have her in, a fighting pose, dynamic pose, but also to go on the side of the superheroes joining in with the storyline, how some of them are becoming venomized. And I thought it'd also be quite cool, instead of just having the symbiote taking over and the fists and that for She-Hulk, because she's quite smart and intelligent, I thought maybe she could use it for weapons, so a scythe on her arm would be quite cool. Not only because she's smashed with her amazing strength, but imagine the power of swinging down with a scythe. And I'm really pleased with this one. I like the fact that it's joined where we left off in the storyline with Optimus Prime, so in the desert, and it's a nice continuation. And the agents of Smash have a base near Vista Verde, which is also in the desert, so the two kind of linked. But I'm also like how the style is developing for the female Venomized characters at the moment, where I've got kind of that slender symbiote takeover of them, as if the host just literally bringing the symbiote out. And I kind of feel that this was another way to introduce superheroes, as I said before, and more of the MCU. There will be more characters as the story arc continues. I'm welcoming any suggestions. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoy the process of bringing this Venomized She-Hulk illustration to life. Back on Megatron's spaceship, the Venom symbiote was in one of Shockwave's testing chambers that had an energy force field, ensuring the symbiote cannot escape, while the walls were emitting a low but steady acoustic pulse that was set to the frequency that will weaken and leave the symbiote in a contained state. Through analysis, Shockwave discovered a way to create a clone of the symbiote's DNA, but with nanomachinery to stimulate the cells so that it would do what they want it to do, using a device that Shockwave created. In effect, it hijacked the signals from the cells of the symbiote, changing them and taking away the creature's free will, even when it bonded to a host. Megatron enters the lab with Soundwave and Starscream. "Shockwave, what's the latest in your experiment to this creature? I want its power as mine," said Megatron. "Lord Megatron, I've made changes to the creature's DNA, and the creature in this cell, in theory, will be under your control with this device. However, I have not tested it yet." Meanwhile, as Shockwave was updating Megatron, Starscream was looking at the creature Shockwave had created based on Venom's DNA and sniggered with a remark in his usual arrogant tone. "What's so special about this organic, Lord Megatron? It's far beneath you to be wanting something as pitiful as this to give you power to defeat Optimus Prime and the Autobots." With that, Megatron says to Starscream, "Why don't you find out for yourself?" And he opens the cell as the altered symbiote launches at Starscream. "Ah!" screaming Starscream. "Why, Lord Megatron, why?" On its knees with his arm stretched towards Megatron, the symbiote wrapped around and altered Starscream as he crawled across the lab floor. Once the symbiote finished fusing with Starscream, it launched towards Megatron, attacking him, but suddenly stopped mid-swing. Megatron's face went from surprise to the same grin that caused Venom to hesitate in fear at the Decepticon outpost. "Excellent, Shockwave. I want to know how your experiments turn out with this new version of Starscream, and I want the device ready so I can control it, even when bonded to it." "Yes, Lord Megatron," replied Shockwave as Megatron walked out of the lab with Soundwave. Venom looked curious about what happened as Shockwave ordered the now venomized Starscream to follow him. And as Shockwave turned and as he began to walk, Starscream began to follow. But on his back as they walked away, Venom noticed a face forming with an all too familiar grin. And the face winked at Venom and faded into Starscream's back again. Now, for this one, I thought it'd be fun, but it'd also be quite awesome to capture the moment Starscream was on his knees begging Megatron for the reason why he was being used as a test subject in Shockwave's experiments on the Venom symbiote. I also wanted to work a bit more on perspective on this, so I started with the drawing grid to try and get a 3-point perspective, to try and get the angle right for sort of like the height in the image and kind of how it would look, which I've kind of got, but I think it still needs a bit more work, and it's something I'm going to be working on my illustrations to improve them by adding a bit more perspective to them instead of always being straight on. And all in all, I am happy with how this turned out in terms of the pose and perspective, and I quite like it. I also have to say, out of all the Transformers, and that's the ones that I've drawn on the channel so far, Unicron, Megatron, Galvatron, Shockwave, Grimlock, the Dinobots, Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, all of them, including my earlier Venomized Autobots and Venomized Decepticons. Starscream, I found, was one of the hardest to draw. He's not got the most difficult design. I think it's more the case of it's the plain parts, like the wings don't look quite right, and he's got his blasters on his arm, so they kind of don't look right in perspective at times. So I struggled with that a lot, but I hope it came out quite well, and I hope you guys liked it. It is something I want to work on more, and I will be doing another Starscream illustration on the channel at some point. Maybe I'll come back to him in a year's time and do a redrawing of the Venomized version. But that is something for another time. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoy the process of bringing this Venomized star screen to life. If you did, and you fancy smashing the like button, be sure to smash that like button. But anyway, I hope you enjoy the rest of the process of turning Starscream into its Venom. It was just another day on the Battle Royale Island, and Hush was stocking up on ammos and supplies near the spire. All of a sudden, a rift opened next to her. She looked confused. it was a portal, but it wasn't made from like a rift to go, and it was strange, slightly different in colour to the rest of the portals that she'd seen in the Battle Royale island. Before she knew it, a white and black substance came flying past her and crashed on the floor behind her. She was confused. She turned around, and this substance didn't have any shape or form, but it was moving on its own. As she went over to investigate, it shot at her, clinging to her body and wrapping around. As you guessed it, this substance is a symbiote. She lost consciousness and fell to the ground, but when she awoke and she stood up, she was shocked to see that her arms and her hands were white with a black pattern on it, and she seemed to feel more powerful and could sense something on the island. She wasn't sure what it was, but she was driven to find it and eliminate it. The portal had closed behind her. She couldn't see any sign of it, and as she thought, is this how I'm going to look now? The symbiote retreated back into herself, giving her her human form. As she started to come out of her daze and sort of like come more to her senses, she had memories in her mind, and she could see a different universe. She could see this creature came through this portal, an experiment that had gone wrong, an explosion of something called a space bridge, and it was hurled into her dimension. Now, this wasn't too strange a surprise for her, because in Fortnite, characters from different dimensions tend to get brought into the island through rifts all the time. But she also had the name Venom in her head. But things were different. This creature, this symbiote that wrapped around her, wanted to go by the name of Anti-Venom. And it was looking not only for other symbiotes of its kind to eradicate, but also for a way back to its original dimension. But in the meantime, Hush, with her new powers and her newfound strength, decided to continue following the urge to find out what it was that was on the island, drawing the symbiote towards it. And that's where we're going to leave off on this one. I wanted to just introduce a little bit into the island and maybe have the idea of more symbiotes through other portals going to be there. I haven't fleshed this out quite so much, and did struggle a little bit trying to introduce the Fortnite Battle Royale Island into the Multiverse Story Arc, more so just to bring in an anti-venom symbiote. And in terms of the design, I basically took Hush's pose from the skin in Fortnite Battle Royale. I redrew that, and then I added my anti-venom symbiote on top of it from the Marvel Spider-Man Maximum Venom series. I think it came out really well. I'm really pleased with this one. I love the contrast of the colours from the original black design of Hush with the white hair to the white and black of the symbiote with the orange yellow eyes and mouth, and I turned the scar on her arm into sort of like a glowing effect similar to the eyes and mouth. All in all, I'm really pleased with how this came out. The background on this, I've basically just taken a screenshot of a Fortnite background and I've added a portal effect behind it, just so it's got a bit of a kind of like a rift effect to tie in with the storyline for this illustration. But I hope you enjoy the process of turning Hush into an anti-venom character for our multi-story arc.
quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah. I think that we've all had enough. What keeps you up at night, yeah. Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah. I think that we've all had enough. Oh, yeah, I think that we've all had enough. Sick of dealing with the old plan. They know that we're calling it wrong. You got me like, oh yeah, I think that we've all had enough. Sick of dealing with the old plan. They know that we're calling it wrong. Hey, it's too late to try to go contain it. A generation fueled by creation. We live lives on a small screen nation. We control the airwaves, no negotiation. I refuse to think we need saving. Something good will come from creation. And when we think that the world is too anxious, we'll adapt, evolve, survive and save it. What keeps you up at night, yeah. Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah. I think that we've all had enough. What keeps you up at night, yeah. Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah. I think that we've all had enough. Oh yeah, I think that we've all had enough. Sick of dealing with the old plan. They know that we're calling it wrong. You got me like, oh yeah, I think that we've all had enough. Sick of dealing with the old plan. They know that we're calling it wrong.
Hot Rod was speeding down the highway, coming back from letting loose and racing across the desert. While blitzing down the road, he spotted what appeared to be Optimus Prime in the distance, and when he got closer, he pulled up alongside Optimus, but noticed something was a bit different. "Optimus," said Hot Rod in a curious tone. "What is it, Hot Rod?" replied Optimus. "What's with the new look? Undercover mission? Want some help taking on some Decepticons?" "Follow me," said Optimus Prime. The two Autobots pull over and transform. Optimus looked normal at this point and went to shake Hot Rod's hand while saying, "It's been an honour to see you become the Autobot you are today." Hot Rod, without a second thought, put his hand out and started to shake Optimus's, not really knowing what's going on, but thinking it's a bit strange. At the same time, he was happy to have the compliment from Optimus Prime. But before Hot Rod knew it, as he was replying to Optimus, "Are you okay? Wait, what's this?" A part of the symbiote, as Optimus changed into his venomized form, separated and started to wrap around Hot Rod. And Optimus then said to Hot Rod, "I'm sorry, my friend, all will become clear." With that, the symbiote spread over Hot Rod really fast and encased him, fusing with him and sharing its memories. Moments later, the symbiote was fully fused with Hot Rod, and the process took a lot less time than with Optimus, mainly because Hot Rod was caught completely unaware, but also in this, the seed of a symbiote is stronger than the original, and this is kind of a seed from the symbiote that fused with Optimus Prime. Now, for this one, I wanted to have the symbiote similar to Optimus's because it's seed, it's kind of an offspring, and in essence, they are stronger the next generation, and the potential of how much stronger it is, we'll find out later on. But I also wanted to have Hot Rod in a bit of a surprised look. I wanted to try and capture as the symbiote was starting to wrap around him in this illustration, and I think I've done that really well. I'm really pleased with how the colour contrast comes out on this. As I said, the transformers take a lot longer to do, and I'm really pleased with how not only the background and the foreground work together, and you'll see that in the final illustration at the end, but also with how it complements each other and the metallic effect I've managed to get on the illustration. And the simple background and the slightly more detailed Venomized hot rod really helps the character pop and stand out. I also had a lot of fun doing the lighting and the shadows on this. I think the Venomized hand could have been done a bit better, but it's kind of like mid-transformation, so it's a bit distorted and a bit skewed. And I wanted to kind of keep Hot Rod's shape and design in the Venomized form, but make it a little bit more organic. But I also wanted to kind of have a more metallic feel to the look of this symbiote as it's fusing with him and changing bits of the metal to organic and keeping some bits metal. It seemed to make sense. I also decided that it'd be quite cool to have his kind of like flame design on his chest become a metal version of like the, almost like the Venom symbiote with the spider symbol in white, but I wanted to keep the flame design how it was. And I also added a bit of texture to this illustration, and I think it helps it stand out. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the process of bringing this Venomized hot rod illustration to life. Let me know in the comments below what you think, and smash a like if you feel like. And most importantly of all, enjoy. left with a sinister smile on his face. Although he's in a holding cell, the realization that he's no longer alone and there's another new symbiote that shares his essence, or rather his will, in this hybrid form was on the ship. Shockwave and Starscream arrive in a cargo hold of the ship with several low-class Decepticon warriors, all who looked puzzled at the new look for Starscream. They were wondering if they would be getting a new look. Shockwave ordered Starscream to attack the Decepticons, and he was amazed and terrified at the speed and ferocity at which they were dispatched. Shockwave was both in awe and terror as he realised the power may be too much for Lord Megatron, but at the same time, Lord Megatron would be very pleased with the destructive force. Starscream made very short work of the low-class Decepticons. One of his arms turned into a razor-sharp blade and sliced several of them in two with very little effort at all. The blasts from these low-level warriors hitting Starscream did nothing. There was no damage, and they didn't even look strong enough to effectively hurt a fly in comparison. But the symbiote shot tendrils out of Starscream's back and threw these low-class warriors across the room. Starscream then leapt over and started to tear them apart, piece by piece, effectively shredding these warriors until none of them were left standing. Shockwave checked his data and decided to test the defensive abilities of the new symbiote hybrid Decepticon. He ordered Starscream not to retaliate and stand there, at which point he then transformed into his tank mode and fired a powerful blast at almost full force at Starscream. The blast hit one of Starscream's wings and blew a section of it off onto the floor. As Shockwave transformed back into his robot form, he looked in astonishment on the floor. He noticed Starscream's wing, although dormant, as he looked up at the wing on Starscream, it looked to be regenerating and practically repaired itself. Shockwave then realised he needed to analyse the piece that came off. As he checked it, it appeared that the nanites within the symbiote host were effectively dead, and the symbiote was just not moving. It was effectively dormant or dead itself. So he decided that unless it was away from the main host body, it was on the main host body, the nanites would basically deactivate and the symbiote would be dormant or useless. Something he wanted to improve later on, but left it for now. Both Starscream and Shockwave left and proceeded on to the next area where the testing will continue, and Shockwave wanted to see what effects the symbiote had on Starscream's vehicle mode. At the same time, Shrapnel was wandering around the ship looking for something to eat. Although the Insecticons are loyal to Lord Megatron to a fault, and they are very, very loyal, they are also controlled by basic instincts, as they effectively are like insects, including the need to feed. And Insecticons love feeding on scrap metal and basically anything metal or scrap whenever they have the urge to. Only Lord Megatron and Soundwave seem to be able to order the Insecticons not to feed when they are hungry, and they will listen to them. Anyway, Shrapnel enters the testing room and sees all the low-class level warriors in pieces all over the room and begins on his all-you-can-eat buffet. As he was halfway through eating the scraps of the now destroyed warriors, he noticed that a piece from the Starscream was on the floor. He didn't know where it came from, but without a second thought, he ate the venomized metal and then continued to devour the remaining scraps until nothing was left. After having this fill, Shrapnel decided that he would head back to where the other Decepticons were, feeling rather pleased with himself. While partway down a corridor, without anyone else around, he started to hunch over and felt weird in his stomach. Now, I use the term stomach because I'm not really sure if you class it as a stomach on a Transformer, but it's the best analogy I've got since he's just eating a piece of venomized metal. Anyway, just then he lifted his head and he screamed in agony, The hybrid symbiote came out of his mouth and started to cover him, changing him from the inside out to be the latest Venomized Decepticon. After the transformation was complete, the newly Venomized Shrapnel changed back into its original form and set off looking for the other Insecticons with an all too familiar smile and sinister grin on his face. And that's where I'll leave it at the story on this one. But in essence, I wanted to take Shrapnel's design and I wanted to capture the moment he's being venomized in this illustration. So he's kind of in the corridor, as you'll see from the background. He's got his hands by his side, his head tilted back and his mouth open, and the symbiote's coming out of the mouth. So I tried to get the face of the symbiote on the main bit and by the mouth that'll wrap around his head, and then get like the symbiote came up in the air and then came back down on parts of the wing and his arm, whereas other sections were covered and clearly transformed into a venomized form. I also wanted to play on the insect a bit more. I know he transforms into a stag beetle, but I thought it'd be quite cool to add several orbs onto his shoulder and kind of give it an almost arachnid feel because of the venom symbiote in essence. And I also wanted to put the venom sort of like metallic spider symbol on his chest bit where it's actually starting to cover. All in all, I like the design and the color scheme for this. The green color complements the black, purple and gold effectively of Shrapnel and also plays off the purple background. I remember a lot of the ships in the cartoon series were purpley color, so I wanted to have that as the corridor because the Decepticons were quite evil and purple is usually associated with evil within the character designs. And I quite like the composition of the piece. I quite like the fact that Shrapnel's in the center, and even though we don't see all of it, I've tried to get the lighting so it's darker at the lower half and light at the top half. Anyway, hope you enjoy the process of bringing Shrapnel into its venomized form. If you do, smash the like button, but enjoy the rest of the video. Carol Danvers, more commonly known as Captain Marvel, was in space patrolling the galaxies in her sector, ensuring the peace was kept within all the civilizations under her jurisdiction. So she was heading towards a planet called Salia. It was on the edge of her sector, and she had intercepted a Salian communication that a giant meteor was heading towards their planet and there was no way to stop it. It would be planetary destruction, a world-ending event. Captain Marvel knew that if she could get there in time, with her powers, she could destroy the meteor, or worst case scenario, change its path to avoid it colliding into the planet. As she came close to the planet, Captain Marvel spotted the giant meteor and positioned herself between the two. Gathering as much energy as she could into her photon blast, she shot a powerful beam from her fists at the meteor. The blast hit with a massive explosion on the meteor's surface, and At first, the meteor started to slow as the impact area from the photon blast began to increase the temperature on the surface and began to crack and break away at the meteorite. Seeing this, Captain Marvel was more determined to destroy the meteor, and she pushed herself and her limits, putting as much energy as she could into the photon blast. The beam began to cut through the meteor and caused it to explode into hundreds of smaller meteors, most of which continued to head towards the planet's surface. Most of the smaller pieces would burn up in the atmosphere, but there are a few larger sections of the meteor that could cause catastrophic destruction to the planet and the civilization below. Although drained from the massive blast that destroyed the meteor into smaller pieces, Captain Marvel headed to deal with the largest one of the remaining fragments. When she got close to the meteor fragment, she summoned all the remaining strength she had and shot a photon blast, destroying it. At the same time as it exploded, she noticed a strange black substance on the meteor fragments. She was concerned about what this substance was, as a lot of the fragments entering the planet's atmosphere were covered in this substance and surviving re-entry. As she was about to head down and deal with these fragments, Captain Marvel let her guard down, and one of the small pieces of meteor next to her had the strange black substance on it. The substance jumped from the meteor fragment and attached itself to Captain Marvel's back. Before she knew it, it had expanded and started to wrap around her. Even her ability to manipulate energy and absorb it to create a photon blast was unable to stop this strange substance from covering her like some kind of cocoon. As she struggled inside this cocoon, Captain Marvel felt that the substance was merging with her and taking over her, as memories of this strange substance, which she realized was a living organism, started flooding into her mind. As the creature had initially fused with Captain Marvel, the cocoon started to crack and rays of light started to blast out from it. All of a sudden, there was an explosion and the cocoon's fragments were scattered into space, as the now venomized Captain Marvel was born above planet Salia. Now taken over fully by the symbiote, she no longer went to stop the remaining fragments with symbiotes from taking over the planet below. Instead, she floated there above the planet with a giant smile on her face as her newly found brothers and sisters descended to the new world below that they were about to conquer. Now, I thought that was a good place to leave off on this one. Kind of like a nice twist of how she became a venomized version, and unfortunately for her, a bit of an epic fail for the civilization down below. But I wanted to capture the moment in space shortly after the cocoon had exploded. So for this illustration, I've got her in kind of a pose where she's leant forwards a bit. She's got the big smile on her face from the fact of the venomized element taking over to her, and she's pretty much transformed into symbiote at this point. I just took a bit of the symbiote away on the face and pretty much her left arm, as it were, just to show Captain Marvel's uniform underneath and part of her face and hair. But all in all, I wanted to keep the design simple. Instead of having a Venom symbol on it, I wanted to put a much more Captain Marvel symbol, so like the star with the stripes next to it. And I also wanted to have energy blasts in the hands, and you'll see later on, I kind of put a negative effect on it. So even though she draws energy in, some of the energy that she's drawing in is negative because of the symbiote, just because of the evil side of it. So you've got kind of like the energy and a void in the middle of it. I also wanted to have the fragments around the planet, so there are a few rocks and meteor bits around this, and I drew them in the initial lineup just to give a bit more to the composition of the piece. There's also a few bits of symbiotes around, which work out quite well. All in all, I like the colour scheme of this. It works quite well. I think potentially near the end, I could add a little tiny bit more light, but maybe I'll tweak that in another illustration if I ever redo this one. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the process of bringing the venomized Captain Marvel to life. The Fantastic Four were heading to Vista Verde in response to a distress call from the She-Hulk. Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards, knew that if the Agents of Smash sent out a distress call, it would be for something serious. Mr. Fantastic jumped into the Fantasticar with Susan Storm, the Invisible Woman, Ben Grimm, the Thing, and flying beside them, Johnny Storm, the Human Torch. As they reached the desert near Vista Verde, they could hear and see a massive battle taking place. There was some kind of strange creature, a bit like a Hulk, battling, but definitely didn't look like one of the Agents of Smash. Not one to hold back, especially when a Hulk was concerned. The Thing jumped out of his seat in the Fantasticar and landed on the ground with an almighty crash. A-Bomb replied, "Whoa, it's the Thing and the Fantastic Four. Awesome." The Hulk looked at the Thing and said, "What are you doing here, Granite Head?" At the same time, the rest of the Fantastic Four arrived at the scene, and Mr. Fantastic explained that they had received a distress call from She-Hulk. "Where is she?" he asked. Replied the Hulk. "You're looking at her." Johnny Storm replied, "Whoa, that thing's She-Hulk? You're kidding, right? What happened to her?" "We don't know. All of a sudden she turned into that thing and attacked us. No warning or sign of anything before it happened." At this point, the Thing, Ben Grimm, decided that the Hulk should sit back and let him handle it. Before anyone could stop him, he leapt at the stage and She-Hulk creature. Before anyone could stop him, he leapt at She-Hulk in her new creature form in front of him and shouted, "It's clobbering time!" And with that, a tendril shot out from She-Hulk and wrapped around him, encasing him. And as the others looked on and Susan Storm shouted, "Ben!" it was already too late. The tendril unwrapped from the Thing, leaving a creature similar looking to She-Hulk, but slightly different in colour, and taking on obviously Ben Grimm's shape and form. Although he loves to infuriate the Thing, the Human Torch, Johnny Storm, when seeing Ben become this strange creature, decided that he would try and burn the substance off him, as he knew his flames couldn't really hurt Ben unless they were at heat over his supernova blast. Johnny created a giant fireball and hurled it at the Thing. It hit, and some of the strange substance came off Ben and screamed as if it was in pain. "It's working," thought Johnny, making a stronger blast and hurling it at the half-covered form of Ben Grimm. "No, kiddo, it's a trap!" With that, as the blast was about to hit, the substance covered Ben up again and threw its hand out towards Johnny, threw the fireball and hitting Johnny straight in the chest. Parts of the organism spread out across his chest. Although taking longer than taking over the Thing, it was slowly wrapping around the Human Torch. Susan Storm, the Invisible Woman, immediately put a force field around Johnny, severing the tendril from Ben. Susan ran over to Johnny and could see the substance trying to break out the force field and attack her as she got close. She had to keep the force field around Johnny as she couldn't risk the creature getting out. Johnny tried to increase the temperature inside the force field to supernova levels in order to incinerate the creature that was attacking him, but it was too late. The substance had already begun to bond with his DNA, making it immune to the immense heat that Johnny could produce. This meant the creature started to speed up the infection of the Human Torch. Johnny started to turn black with a pinkish red flame over his body and a sinister smile on his face. As he looked at his sister, the Invisible Woman, Susan Storm, the pink flames filled the force field and were so intense that Susan couldn't keep them contained. As this new form of Johnny Storm, now taken over by the strange substance, burst free and rose into the air. To everyone's surprise, the next thing the Human Torch did was hurl fireballs at them. Normally, this wouldn't surprise anybody and it's a standard attack from the Human Torch, but as Susan Storm put up a force field and the fireballs hit it, amongst the flames, the core of the fireballs was solid and moving. It was part of the creature that had taken over Ben and Johnny. As this was going on, Mr. Fantastic was trying to figure out what the strange substance was, and he was scanning the fight from the Fantasticar. As he studied the readings, he was so focused on the results, he did not notice that the piece that was severed from Ben Grimm was on the floor inside the force field that Johnny was in. That piece had gotten blasted over to the Fantasticar. As he was about to tell everyone the results of the analysis, the severed substance shot at him and started taking him over. Desperate, trying to buy time, Mr. Fantastic began to stretch and stretch, making himself as long as he possibly could, so the creature would have a hard time taking him over. Mr. Fantastic was unable to buy much time though, as the substance spread at such an insane rate, and to compensate for the elastic abilities Mr. Fantastic has, the substance shot tendrils out, sticking to other areas of his body as it zigged and zagged across the skies, increasing the rate it took him over until he curled over into a ball-like shape and emerged as another victim of the strange substance. Upon seeing this, Susan Storm lost focus and hope. The force field she had created to stop the fireballs began to shrink more and more, and as it was at its smallest, the thing leapt in the air and came at her, flying down with a massive smash on the force field, shattering it to pieces. When the dust cleared, Susan Storm was nowhere to be seen. She had used her ability to turn invisible to try and escape being surrounded by her family, the rest of the Fantastic Four. The Thing and Human Torch began to search, but Mr. Fantastic had another idea. With the new increase to his abilities from the substance taking him over, he stretched around a large area and began to shrink the area he covered, getting smaller and smaller, until he stopped. He was being blocked by a force field from Susan Storm, inside of it trying to stop him, encasing her, turning her into the next victim of the strange substance. Unfortunately, she was unable to hold him back, and the new form of Mr. Fantastic wrapped around her, and part of the substance on him began to fuse and take over the Invisible Woman. Moments later, Mr. Fantastic unwrapped, and Susan Storm had become the latest superhero to be taken over by this substance. The superhero team, the Fantastic Four, had now become venomized, and all of them turned their attention to the remaining agents of Smash. At this point, the Hulk muttered under his breath, "Oh crap." And that's where we're going to leave it today. For the design notes, I basically wanted to keep most of the Fantastic Four's form so you can see them and have them mid-transformation, and I wanted to push a bit more how they look. So they're recognisable, but their Venom forms are either, like Johnny Storm, it's kind of like a pinker version to show more intensive heat, as it were. Ben Grimm has a few rock bits on his arm, but it's more organic and sturdy and solid like a Hulk would be. And like Mr. Fantastic would just be kind of like the symbiote stretching, but it would have an insane range because of the abilities, as well as being able to shoot tendrils out at the end. And for the Invisible Woman, she can just create force fields, and the force fields are going to be a lot stronger. And when she turns invisible, it's the perfect way to sneak up and venomize anyone. Anyway, hope you enjoy the process of bringing the Fantastic Four to life in the latest part of the Multiverse Story Arc. You guys voted for it, and I enjoyed drawing it. So, yeah, hope you enjoyed how the final illustration came out. Everyone's favourite X-Men with an attitude, Wolverine, was travelling through New York on the trail of a gang who kept kidnapping mutants and using them as slaves. He followed them to a remote warehouse by the docks. And as he was about to infiltrate the warehouse to find and free any captives, he heard a strange noise coming from behind him. As Wolverine turned around, he could see a small blue floating energy sphere. And as he was thinking, what the fuck? There was a loud sound and the sphere exploded with a shockwave, knocking Wolverine off his feet. As he looked up, Wolverine could see the sphere had turned into a portal. And he could see what looked like the countryside with a strange banana-looking creature running around shooting what looked to be a living, bouncing, live llama piñata. As the rounds hit the llama, it released ammunition in glowing jars. What the frick? I must have hit my head harder than I thought. What weird Alice in Wonderland have I got myself into now? With that thought, all of a sudden, Wolverine was hit by a plunger on a rope, smack bang in the middle of his chest. Before he could do anything, there was a whooshing sound and he was dragged through the portal as it closed. Wolverine was thrown to the ground and could see that the strange banana creature had been the one to fire the plunger. Getting up, he grabbed the rope, sliced it with his claws, and let out a growl at the strange creature. "What the hell, bub? What's the meaning of this? Some freaking walking fruit decides to drag me through that strange-looking portal to God knows where?" He stopped for a moment and turned to head back through the portal. It was gone. "Hey, bub, where'd the portal go? Now how in the hell am I meant to get back?" As Wolverine turned back to look at the strange creature, a familiar tendril grabbed it and sent it flying through the air into the distance. Wolverine instantly recognized the tendril, and he looked to where it had come from. "Venom!" shouted Wolverine. "What in the name of all things hideous are you doing here?" But before Wolverine could say anything else, Venom launched at him, leaping into the air and flinging an arm that shot out a tendril towards our hero. Wolverine dodged and swung for Venom with his claws. After a bit of back and forth, that seemed to be stalemating, Wolverine landed a hit on Venom's chest with his claws. Venom let out a loud scream which turned into a loud laugh. As Wolverine looked at him in anger and confusion, Venom turned around. His chest was healing and the part of the symbiote on the claws of Wolverine had started to move up towards his arm, trying to bond with our mutant. As the symbiote attempted to bond with Wolverine, he curled over and let out a scream of agony. "Ah!" As his healing factor was attempting to fend off the Clintar DNA trying to take him over. Venom continued to laugh as the part that broke off from him fully engulfed Wolverine in a black ooze slimy substance. All of a sudden, Venom's laughing stopped as he was interrupted by a menacing laugh from Wolverine. Venom looked confused and in shock. When the venomized form of Wolverine started to change colour and the eyes and mouth began to glow with an orangey yellow colour. "What's happening? What are you? What have you become?" shouted Venom. "We are anti-venom," shouted the merged new form of Wolverine, as Venom shot a tendril at the anti-venom version of Wolverine. There was no attempt to dodge. Instead of dodging, the tendril hit anti-venom straight in the chest. And then all of a sudden, Venom let out an almighty scream of pain and agony. "Ah!" Looking in disbelief and agony at Wolverine, Venom spotted that his tendril was melting away after hitting the symbiote. Wolverine's healing factor had caused the Clintar symbiote to mutate and become lethal to regular symbiotes. And that's where we'll end this one. I hope you all enjoyed this story bit of lore and how Wolverine became an anti-venom character. I thought it suited well with his healing factor, and if anyone could turn it into an anti-venom character naturally, it'd be someone with a factor like Wolverine. And I really enjoyed doing this latest part of the Multiverse Story Arc. I think it makes sense with his abilities, and it's a nice tie-in to the Hush anti-venom by bringing Wolverine into the Fortnite universe via a portal. If any Fortnite fans caught that the banana character is Peely, well done. Anyway, hope you enjoy the rest of this illustration as we bring it to life.
Hold me close till I get up. Time is barely on our side. I don't wanna waste what's left. The storms we chase are leading us, and love is all we'll ever trust. Yeah, no, I don't wanna waste what's left. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go.
Powder, as she was known in her youth, came from the streets of Zorn. She was always tinkering and creating things, but she was an outcast from normal society, and after the death of her adoptive father and brothers, along with her adoptive sister who left her, she was driven into madness. After she fell into madness, she soon became a force to be reckoned with, causing chaos wherever she went. Rumours quickly began to circulate about a pale blue-haired Zonti girl carrying heavy weapons and explosives wreaking havoc throughout the city. One day, Jinx was out pulling pranks and causing havoc, destroying public property and spraying "Jinx was here" at the scenes of her chaos. Before she knew it, the police force had caught up with her. She was running away from them while using the weapons she had created to cause explosions and hinder the police following her. The next thing she knew, there was an explosion next to her. She was sent flying through the air, separating her from her weapons. After hitting a wall and falling to the ground, Jinx got up, dazed and confused, and realised that her weapons weren't around her. She didn't have time to get them, and only had a few glowing stones on her that she found when she was a young child. She began to run again, after remembering the police were chasing her. Jinx scaled the side of a building, using the pipes hanging out of it to leap and bound, almost in a gymnastic aerobatic style, up the side of this building, in order to escape from the police force. She then leapt from rooftop to rooftop in an attempt to basically get away. Unfortunately for her, the police had time to surround her when she was dazed and confused. The route she was taking was now cut off, and there's no way to escape. Jinx turned around and froze for a minute, wondering how she would be able to get out of this scenario. All of a sudden, she heard a strange whispering voice coming from her pouch where the stones were located. She took the stones out of the pouch and held her in her hand. She could hear some words being whispered and had a strange feeling that there was a power beyond her imagination awaiting her if she spoke these words. Now that we have our inks done, let's add the flats.
All right.
Absolutely fantastic. I'm loving the colours that we're using on this. But we're not done there, guys. We've got to add the shadows and the lights and bring this illustration to life into its final form. So, let's crack on. Jinx opened her hand, showing the stones in the palm, and began to repeat the words that were in her head. Clintar e ungre cum anima mea. As she spoke the words, the stones glowed, and a massive swirl of energy surrounded her, tearing up the air behind her, splitting it and creating a blue glowing portal with a dazzling light. The police force all stopped. They were in wonder and awe at this sight, as well as a little bit confused, not sure what was going on, and in a split second they paused. They saw something they'd never seen before, or let alone expected to see. A few tendrils shot out from the portal and began to cover Jinx. She let out a crazed scream which turned into a maddening laugh. That sent a chill down the spine of the police enforcers around her. They watched in horror as the figure of Jinx began to change from the crazed, havoc-loving, pale, blue-haired girl to something more sinister, with what looked like orange skin and green cloud shapes over her body. Once the bonding process had finished, she let out a cry, shouting, "We are Havoc!" before leaping towards the police enforcers and firing a tendril at them, which crashed into the ground with such force it sent several enforcers flying through the air. And that's where we're going to leave it on the lore this time. I had a lot of fun working on this piece. I think the contrast of the orange ties in with the blue colour of Jinx, and I really like the composition of the piece. I thought it'd be quite fun to have the symbiote also working and taking over sort of like one of her weapons, like the trinkets that she makes, like the grenade. If you guys want to see more characters from League of Legends on the channel, make sure you subscribe and let me know in the comments below who you'd like to see. I had a lot of fun doing this, and I'm looking forward to doing a lot more characters. Also, don't forget to check out the Netflix show, Arcane League of Legends. It's what inspired me to do a League of Legends piece, and I'm really pleased with this and definitely have to do more on the channel. Anyway, hope you enjoy the rest of the process of bringing this illustration to life.
Blaster was in the Ark, listening to his favourite rock and roll Earth songs in his tape deck mode when Teletran 1 noticed that Optimus Prime and Hot Rod were returning. Blaster transformed back into his robot mode, ready to report to Optimus Prime about the events happening on Cybertron. Optimus and Hot Rod were in their normal forms, and not the new venomized forms that they had gained while out in the desert. Optimus Prime entered the Ark. Optimus, we have communication from Moonbase 1. Megatron has left Cybertron and is on his way back to Earth. Put me through to Moonbase 1 right away. We need to find out what Megatron is up to, since returning to Cybertron and the destruction of the space bridge to prevent his return to Earth. This is the first time he has left in an attempt to return. Blaster transformed into his tape deck mode and interfaced with Teletran 1, ready to begin a transmission. Moonbase 1, this is Earth. Moonbase 1, this is Earth. Come in, Moonbase 1. Suddenly, Spike and Jazz appeared on the screen and replied, Earth, this is Moonbase 1. Optimus Prime began to speak. We need to find out what Megatron is up to. Do you have any idea why he left Cybertron? Optimus, chatter from Cybertron, and he has gone in search of a power that can allow him to win the war for Cybertron. There's a rumour on the way to Earth he has found something that is more powerful than anything we have ever encountered before. There's something about a Decepticon outpost being wiped out by this unknown force. We must be cautious. If Megatron has found a new power to aid him in his efforts, we need to be prepared. Luckily, while out and about, I may have encountered what we need to restore the balance, if the rumours are saying it. Spike and Jazz both replied, Really? What have you found, Optimus? I will inform you later after I confirm if this will work, as I hope. Keep an eye out for more news. Prime out. With that, Blaster ended the communication and disconnected from Teletran 1. Prime, did you really find something here on Earth that can go against whatever Megatron has found, if those rumours are true? I have indeed, old friend. Would you like to see? Yes, replied Blaster. With that, Optimus put his hand on Blaster's shoulder and changed into his new venomized form. Prime, what is this? Before Blaster could do anything, part of the symbiote from Optimus' hand separated and began to merge with him. Within moments, Blaster was engulfed in the symbiote and fused with his Cybertronian DNA. A few moments later, Blaster, in his new venomized form, was born. Filled with new strength and power, he looked at Optimus Prime and smiled. Now I understand, Prime, what you meant. We must share this power with the rest of the Autobots before Megatron gets to Earth. Fear not, my friend. We shall, till all are one. And that's where I'm going to leave it on this one. Wanted to just tie things together with bringing back the Autobots being venomized in the Multiverse Story Arc, and had a lot of fun doing the design for Blaster. He's basically Soundwave's counterpart. So the key idea for this is that he has the same abilities in a way as Soundwave. He'll have the tape decks that will be venomized forms later on in the Multiverse Story Arc. He kind of has a passion and a hate for the Decepticons, but a bit of respect for Soundwave, so there could be quite an epic battle later on. I also wanted to add in something similar to what's happening on the Decepticon ship with Shrapnel, where venomized versions are slowly spreading through each of the ranks from the Decepticons and the Autobots. This was mainly just to tie things together and also bring a bit more suspense to the story. In terms of this piece, I've got Blaster in quite a nice pose. He's in quite a powerful stance, but at the same time kind of noble, but you can tell it's him. I just wanted to have about half the symbiote on one side of him, just giving a nice effect. Later on, you'll see I've gone with a bit more of a busier and more impactful background than I normally do. I decided I wanted to spice things up a bit. I've also been using a few different brushes on this one, so the final effect is a bit more polished and a bit more rendered in some areas with shading. I think this works really well for the composition of the piece. Make sure you watch to the end, and I hope you enjoy bringing this illustration of Venomized Blaster to life.
I can't take much more now. I can't hold on to everything. I don't know what to say now.
So as a treat for you guys, I thought I'd share a little bit of my process for adding the metallic highlights onto a transformer in this illustration using Procreate. I initially wanted to do a soft airbrush and have that reflect on the main kind of like glass bit of the tape deck, but that didn't really work. Later on I went to do a soft airbrush again, but I used the selector tool, and the key bit of this lasso tool is that I can get those crisp lines and then gradients blending in, and if you set your soft airbrush to a low opacity, you can get this really cool effect where it just adds to the shine and the texture. And this is one of the fun parts of doing the illustration. It is a bit time consuming, but the overall effects at the end are so worth it. I promise you, if you use this technique even on non-metallic objects and just have it brighter at your light source going to the shadows with a gradient, it will add so much to your artwork.
Shrapnel, now filled with a new hunger and fused with a Cybertronian symbiote, began to head to a section of the spaceship where the Insecticons were. On his travels, he passed one of the Predacons. Although on the same side as the Insecticons, the Predacons and the Insecticons have never really seen eye to eye. As he walked past with contempt for the Predacon, Shrapnel muttered under his breath, "Waste of scrap metal, wouldn't be worth a meal." The Predacon Headstrong had heard this, and as his name suggests, he's headstrong, and when he puts his mind to something, very few can change it. He decided, upon hearing this comment from Shrapnel, that he would lash out and hit the Insecticon into the wall of the corridor. Thinking he had slammed Shrapnel into the wall, Headstrong failed to realise that part of Shrapnel had turned to the symbiote, which had latched onto his arm, and the nearly venomized form clung to Headstrong's fist. Using sheer force, Headstrong ripped his arm away from the symbiote, and before it could start to merge with him, he managed to shake the few bits on him off. At this point, any bot with an ounce of sense in their spark would have retreated back, or at least got some help. But Headstrong decided he could teach Shrapnel a lesson. He decided to charge at Shrapnel, thinking that its immense strength would be enough to slam the Insecticon and pretty much immobilise him. But as he charged, even with his immense strength, Shrapnel sent out a couple of tendrils from his chest, which hit Headstrong and started to slow him down, as well as started to engulf him. Headstrong, still trying to force his way forward, was soon covered by the symbiote, and without even a sound or a scream, he stopped moving. This wasn't from the symbiote stopping him or bonding with his DNA. Headstrong had used so much force that his joints had overheated and literally seized up, which basically made him an easier target for the symbiote, and before long it merged with him, adding him to the ranks of the venomized Decepticons, steadily growing in number right under Megatron's nose. A little later on route to Earth, the Decepticon spaceship had to stop off and replenish its energon supplies. Rather than stopping on an abandoned planet to gather energon, Megatron had decided to send the Predacons to destroy a remote Autobot outpost that was near them en route. The Predacons left the spaceship headed towards the outpost. Razorclaw sent Divebomb and Headstrong ahead to recon the outpost, but not to go too far, just far enough to get an idea of the number of Autobots present. As the pair set off, Divebomb transformed into his Hawk mode and flew up high into the sky while Headstrong set off in his Rhino form. Divebomb scouted the base from up high, enjoying the fact that If he attacked right now, he could decimate the Autobots, raining destruction down on them, which is one of his favourite things to do. But despite his urges, he managed to hold back and flew down headstrong to report his findings. As Dive Bomb landed, he transformed back. Without warning, Headstrong shot a tendril out as Dive Bomb got close to give him the information. Dive Bomb tried to transform and fly away, but it was too late. The tendril hit Dive Bomb, and as he let out a scream and shouted, "Headstrong, what are you doing? What's happened to you? Ah!" Before Dive Bomb could get a reply from Headstrong, the symbiote had covered his wings to take over the Predacon's body. Within moments, Dive Bomb emerges as the symbiote separates the tendril, joining the two Predacons. "I see, we must turn the others. With this power, we'll become stronger than anyone can imagine." The pair, now venomized, changed back into their original forms and returned to the rest of the team. Razorclaw asked Dive Bomb what he had discovered about the outpost. Dive Bomb mentioned that there were a small number of Autobots and he could easily deal with them from up high. At this, Tantrum, who only knows really frustration and anger, decided that Dive Bomb wasn't capable of taking on the outpost and that he should be the one to take them out. Dive Bomb, who loves combat, immediately decided to challenge Tantrum to a fight to show how capable he is. Headstrong thought that this would be the perfect chance for Dive Bomb to convert another one of the team. Razorclaw was just thinking that it'd be more trouble to try and sort them out, and they should get on with it if they're going to fight. Although he is patient, he knew that both of them were too hot-headed to back it down at this point. Rampage just couldn't be bothered with the fight and wanted to take action. He had waited, and he hated to wait. He waited long enough for the recon to be completed by his two teammates. He just wanted to destroy some Autobots. Suddenly, as Tantrum thought he could get the upper hand and attacked Dive Bomb, the Predacon took to the skies and began to rain fire down with Tantrum standing. Now, although this seemed like a hellback version of Dive Bomb's normal attack, it contained a little something extra. There were small symbiote spores in the dust clouds surrounding Tantrum and the other Predacons. These spores slowly infiltrated the Cybertronian warriors, bonding with them on a smaller but unnoticeable scale. Tantrum shot a blast back at Dive Bomb before Razorclaw shouted, "Enough! Lord Megatron will not be happy if we do not complete this mission." Tantrum, very angry and with a lot of attitude, reluctantly agreed to stop and continue the mission. Dive Bomb came back down and transformed. He looked at Headstrong, he knew what had just happened, and they both gave a slight nod and continued to act normal in front of the other team members. As they were heading towards the outpost, Tantrum began to slow down and lean over, looking like he was running low on energy or his joints were seizing up, but this shouldn't have been possible this early into the mission. Rampage was not happy and told Tantrum to hurry up and stop slacking. Tantrum shouted back at Rampage, Get lost, or I'll turn you into scrap metal. Meanwhile, while this was going on, small symbiote tendrils started to come out of Tantrum's back as the spores are taking him over. As the Predacons get within a few kilometers of the Autobot outpost, Tantrum fell to the ground and let out a scream, "Ah!" Rampage and Razorclaw look back to see Tantrum curled over and covered in symbiote tendrils. "What's going on? What's happening to Tantrum?" said Rampage. Razorclaw, true to his nature, was just waiting patiently to see what happens. Meanwhile, Headstrong and Divebomb looked pleased with the symbiote spores taking effect on Tantrum. Both knew that Rampage and Razorclaw would soon be joining them. Tantrum looked up now, fully covered in the symbiote in its new form, before launching at Rampage. As Tantrum attacked Rampage, Rampage jumped back and barely dodged the attack with his cat-like reflexes. "What's happening? What's going on? Why is he so fast?" thought Rampage. Although shocked at how much faster Tantrum had become in this new form, he was also full of excitement and overwhelmed with joy, as finally he could take action. He had waited and waited far too long on this mission. Tantrum, getting more furious and angry as he missed Rampage again and again with his attacks, suddenly grew an extra set of arms from the tendrils that came out from his back. Rampage decided to attack as he dodged for long enough, and it looked like anything longer Tantrum would get the upper hand. As he launched back with his counterattack, one of the newly formed arms grabbed him and held him up in the air. "Let me down! I'll turn you into scrap!" But with that, Tantrum shot his other tendril arm into Rampage's chest, saying, "Not happening fast enough, let me help you along." Razorclaw looked shocked as he watched Rampage start to change into a form similar to that of Tantrum's. With a long tongue sticking out the tiger face on his chest, Rampage had now become venomized.
Because it's you and only you. I can feel I'm changing. I don't know if I'll ever go back. All the ways that you make me, build me up on the things I lack. I don't ever wanna lose you
now. Razorclaw was assessing how he can use this to his advantage, but also aware he might be next if Headstrong and Divebomb weren't attacked before him. He just stood there and watched as the two altered forms of Tantrum and Rampage looked over in his direction. Still stood motionless but ready to react against the two of them. He noticed Headstrong and Divebomb acting differently. They walked towards Rampage and Tantrum. As they walked forwards, Razorclaw was shocked. He didn't expect to see what he ended up seeing. To his surprise, they started changing into forms similar to Rampage and Tantrum. So that's how it's happened. It must have been Headstrong and Divebomb, but when? As he was thinking back, Razorclaw realised that the only moment that Tantrum could have been infected must have been the fight with Divebomb, but Divebomb didn't touch Tantrum, so how? Razorclaw put his hand to his chest as he realised it must have been when Divebomb attacked and made the dust cloud. Wait, does that mean when he said not happening fast enough, that meant the transformation? Does that mean I'm infected as well? As Razorclaw looked at the other Predacons, who were now fully venomized, he dropped to one knee and screamed out loud as tendrils and symbiote parts shot out from his body, covering him. As the other Predacons looked on and smiled at him, Razorclaw finally became one of them. Predacons still had a mission to complete though, but they wanted to complete it quickly and test their new powers in their combined form. The newly venomized Razorclaw shouted out loud, "Predacons combine!" With that, the Predacons combined to form Predaking in a new venomized form, and they set off to destroy the Autobot outpost. I'm going to leave it there, and I think this could be an epic start of something in the Multiverse Story Arc. We've now just venomized a combiner set of Transformers that are perhaps some of the most lethal ones in the Transformer universe. This is definitely tipping the favour of the battle on Megatron's side, but what will happen later on? Just have to wait and see. Join one of the children of the Titan, Caminus, on her return from a patrol scouting a Decepticon out. Although she possesses the rare and unique ability of City Speaker, Windblade had decided to join Optimus Prime and the Autobots in a fight against Megatron and the Decepticons in order to rescue Cybertron and one day free its people. One reason for this is her personality. She puts truth and duty above all else, even when both seem impossible. She can see the good in others and, on occasion, has turned enemies into allies, which has put a fear in the spark of anyone who'd prey on the insecurities of others. But those are stories for another time. Windblade was returning from scouting the Decepticon outpost. It had been long thought that the outpost was deserted, but intel suggested that there was new activity and she was sent to scout out and find out what was going on. While returning to the Ark, Windblade flew across the Vista Verde desert. Thinking that she'd be back in no time, she was startled when a fireball hurled close by to her. Startled, she transformed and landed by a large rock structure to see what was going on. To her surprise and amazement, she saw some of the superpowered humans on Earth in a massive battle, but although she recognised the Agents of Smash, she thought they were battling what looked like the Fantastic Four. Well, she believed they were the Fantastic Four. According to her databanks, the powers that were being used had to be of this team of superheroes. But she had to take a second look. Her optics could clearly see they did not look quite like the Fantastic Four that she had on file. They looked more like something out of a horror movie the humans like to watch. While looking at the strange creatures, she had the feeling that they looked familiar to an organic species in the archives on Caminus. She couldn't be sure, but they looked similar to a parasitic race that once scavenged the universe, known as the Clintar. Realising that there might be something going on that's more than meets the eye, Windblade tried to contact the Ark and Optimus. Windblade to Optimus. Optimus Prime, come in. There was no answer. Windblade to the Ark. Windblade to the Ark. Is anyone there? Hello? Is anyone there? Again, there was no answer. Realising that she was on her own, Windblade said to herself, scrap. She felt she could not leave the Agents of Smash fighting against this potential threat, and sprang out from behind the rock structure. She powered up her turbines as she let out a blast of wind that felt like a small hurricane had just hit the members of the Fantastic Four. The Hulk looked somewhat confused before A-Bomb shouted out, "Hey Hulk, it's one of those Transformer things. Watch out though, we don't know if it's a good guy or a bad guy." To this, Hulk replied, judging by the fact that she just blew away the Fantastic Four, I would say one of the good guys. At this point, Windblade asked the Hulk what was going on and why the Clintar were here on Earth. What was the Fantastic Four doing bonded with them? The Hulk replied, "The Clin what? What's a Clintar?" And yes, that was the Fantastic Four. We came to help them against a strange creature, and as a part of it hit them, they turned into this. Windblade looked worried. So it is the Clintar. We need to get out of here now and get back to the Ark. We need to get help from Optimus Prime and the other Autobots before it's too late. If we don't get the word out to them soon, the planet is doomed. At this point, Red Hulk had decided that retreat was not an option and took his two guns out and started to charge and shoot at the Fantastic Four, who began to regroup and head towards Windblade and the Agents of Smash. Although he managed to keep free of the Fantastic Four at bay, the Invisible Woman she had disappeared in all the commotion. A-Bomb was the first to notice and shouted out loud to everyone, "Hey guys, where's the Invisible Woman?" Everyone looked at him with a sense of panic and said, "Wait, what?" Hulk shouted to Red Hulk, "Hey Red, where did she go? You charged in at them, you must have seen her turn invisible." Red replied, "What are you talking about, you green lump of gamma waste? I started blasting all four of them and they're all still there." Oh crap. It was at this point Red realised only 3 members of the Fantastic Four were in front of him. They all had sinister smiles on their faces. Red suddenly shouted, "Watch out guys, she's not with them. and I've no idea where she is. At this point, everyone started looking around to see if they could spot where the invisible woman had gone to, looking for any sign that she was moving about. But it was next to impossible. With the heat coming from the desert, it made everything in the distance look a bit hazy. Windblade started up her turbines, hoping that it would show where the invisible woman was. As the sand picked up and started to create a mini sandstorm, A-Bomb noticed the outline of someone up close to Windblade and shouted, "Hey, look out!" Windblade spun around and swung her Stormfall sword, which sliced through a tendril that was coming towards her. As the invisible woman let out a scream of pain, she became visible again, along with the severed tendril on the desert floor. Despite this, the invisible woman backed off and began to smirk in the direction of Windblade and Hulk. Hulk muttered out loud, "Something isn't right here. Why is she still smirking like that despite being injured?" Just then, he looked at Windblade's Stormfall sword and noticed the reflections on the sword flicker and move. "Watch out, it's on your sword!" But it was too late. The symbiote's pieces left on the sword had already started to work off on Windblade's arm while they were invisible and were spreading at a rapid rate. Windblade tried to swing and shake off the symbiote, even using her turbine to try and blow it away, but it was no use. The symbiote was already bonding with her Camion DNA. She turned to Hulk and A-Bomb and shouted to them, "Run! Head to the Ark!" And in her final words before being enveloped by the symbiote, "Tell Optimus about this threat. Only he can find a solution and save us." At this point, the Hulk told A-Bomb to go and find this Ark and Optimus and let him know what was going on. A-Bomb started to say, "But Hulk, shouldn't we all go?" "Just do it, Rick. We don't have time for this. Now go. Red and I will hold them off." Red looked at Hulk and said, "Just you and me again, Edgarini." At this point, Windblade let out a loud cry as the symbiote had finished merging with her. She turned her gaze to the remaining agents of Smash. It was at this point both Red Hulk and the Hulk looked at each other and decided to both slam their hands together to create a gamma-powered shockwave. And that's where we'll leave it this time. What will happen to the agents of Smash? Will A-Bomb get to the Ark in time? Will Green and Red Hulk get to safety? Find out the answers to these questions and more in the next episode of the Multiverse Story Arc. There's a special force that helps protect the galaxy. This force is known by the name the Plumbers, not to be confused with regular plumbers who fix toilets and whatnot. These plumbers are a galactic policing force, built from members of millions of species throughout the galaxy. They defend against threats and criminals of all shapes and sizes. Among the ranks of this organisation is a young man from Earth named Ben Tennyson, who has a rather unique circumstance. Ben happened to stumble across a device when he was younger called the Omnitrix. This allowed him to gain the ability to change into a vast number of alien species, as well as use their innate powers and abilities. This has led to some amazing stories and encounters, but we'll cover those another time. Today's story is one that's been classified as top secret, even among higher members of the Plumbers organisation. While out on a routine patrol, Ben encountered an alien species that had not been found before, and definitely was not in the Omnitrix. This species was thought to be some blackish purple goo-type creature, and they found it on a rock they're investigating, as the Plumbers had discovered some strange readings coming from this asteroid. Ben, in his usual nonchalant way, decided to pull out an interesting looking rock while saying he doesn't see the point of this. It's not as exciting or fun as taking down bad guys. As Ben pulled out the rock, a piece of black glue landed on the Omnitrix. "Yuck," said Ben as he went to pull the goo off his arm. All of a sudden, there was a crackle of green energy from the Omnitrix. It activated, and the goo was blasted away from his arm onto the ground a few meters in front of him. "Ben!" shouted Rook. "I'm okay," replied Ben. "That's good. But Ben, what is that thing?" As they looked at the black substance that had been on Ben's arm, it seemed to form a face with a sinister grin on it. "I have no idea, but I have a bad feeling about this." As Ben said this, the substance formed the shape of a pyronite, but it was a little different in colour than the normal members of the species. The plasma element of its body was a blue glowing colour instead of the usual yellow and red. And the flames were blue as well. The only time Ben had seen something like this was when he had a cold and the Omnitrix inverted Heat Blast's abilities to be cold rather than heat. As for the body of this creature, it was darker in colour with a bluish grey hue on the reddish molten, kind of like slabs from Heat Blast's body. "The power!" cried the substance. "I must have more of this power. So many wonderful species and so many abilities. I must have it." Ben replied, "Wait, You can talk? With this, the Omnitrix made an all too familiar sound, and Ben lifted up his arm and slammed his hand down onto the watch in order to change into an alien that would be ideal against this strange creature. Well, that was the plan anyway. As the flash of light from the Omnitrix faded, Ben looked at his hands. "Aw, man, I thought we were past this. Come on, give me a break." Ben had turned into a hero he hadn't used in a while. A hero that was perhaps not the best alien creature to go against a pyrokinetic species. He turned into Ripjaws. Perfect on a world full of water. But on this rock, against a strange creature with the powers of a pyronite, potentially useless. Ben went to cancel the watch in order to change back to human form, but it didn't work. It appeared that after the creature had touched the Omnitrix, it caused some kind of malfunction with it. "Great, just what I need," said Ben. As Ben looked at the creature, it said, "I have this form too," and changed to be a weird looking version of Ripjaws. Ben looked and said, "What? It even has a cooler form than I do?" This version of Ripjaws had red fins, a blue coloured body that flowed like the substance it originally was, but also quite solid in parts, and had a white emblem on its chest. It looked kind of like a spider shape, but Ben wasn't paying too much attention to this. The body had a few extra glowing elements, and again this was in a bluish colour, and it had what looked like a few extra spikes on it. "This form is good, but I feel as though it'll be more powerful in liquid," said the creature. "Well, yeah, but what can you do? There's no water here," said Ben with a smile. At that point, the creature smiled back, and Ben and Rook looked somewhat confused. Rook? "Yeah, Ben? There isn't any water here, is there?" "Correct. My readings aren't showing any signs of water or a similar substance." "I need more," said the creature. And a tendril shot out towards Ben and hit the Omnitrix, causing another shockwave blast. "Ah!" Ben and Rook were sent flying backwards as the creature let out a menacing laugh. "Ha ha 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 ha!" As the dust settled, the creature had taken a new form from the aliens in the watch. Ben was back in his human form. It seemed the watch had timed out and was needed for a recharge before it could be used again. Ben and Rook looked at the creature, almost in a daze as the dust was settling, and it had another one of Ben's original aliens as its form. This time, it was Upgrade. It didn't seem like this form was too different from the original Upgrade, but there was a few changes in colour. The bits that are normally black on Upgrade were a bluish purpley grey colour, and the white element of the body was a golden colour. The main difference was that the circle symbol on the face was more of an intricate design, and where the glowing tech elements were green, there were red elements, and more of them, looking a bit more like a tattoo design. Either way, they looked similar to malware, but far more menacing. Ben turned to Rook and said, "Oh great, how are we going to deal with this thing if it gets on the ship and upgrades the form? There's no telling where it might go and what damage it might cause." Rook responded, Ben, I do not think that would be a problem. It seems to be fixated on you and the Omnitrix." "The power!" cried the creature, now in a crazed, addictive daze. Yes, this is what I need. This is what I'm after." The creature then extended its arm towards Ben and tried to grab the Omnitrix. Rook pushed Ben aside and threw a device to set up a kind of like energy barrier. But it was just absorbed by the creature and became a part of its body. Rook looked at Ben and said, "I had forgotten that species could do that." Ben replied, "You think?" The creature, still reveling in its newfound power, said to Ben and Rook, "I can still sense more power in that device on your arm. Millions of species to bond with, to make me stronger." "Not a chance," shouted Ben. Just then the Omnitrix made a sound that was like music to Ben's ears. "All right," he shouted. "Now let's see what we can do to stop this creature before it gets out of hand." "Huh?" Ben looked in surprise at the Omnitrix, as it was flickering very fast between two alien silhouettes, and he wasn't sure which ones they were. It was too fast for the eye to see. Despite everything, though, and all the weird, wacky issues Ben has had with the Omnitrix in the past, and it being on the fritz, he'd always had an alien that seemed to turn the tide in any given situation, and he believed this time would be no different. "Here goes nothing," Ben shouted as he slammed his hand down onto the watch. He transformed into the next alien, but this time something strange happened to the creature as well. Ben and the creature had both changed into the same alien. Ben was a little confused to say the least. He didn't see the creature get a hold of the Omnitrix this time. Rook? Did it get a hold of the Omnitrix while I was changing form or something? No, Ben. When you change in a cannonball, the creature also changed into that version of an Arborian Pelarota. Wait, what does that mean? It can change into any of the aliens in the Omnitrix? Or is it somehow linked to the transformations now? Ben and Rook were interrupted by the creature shouting, "More! I want more! Still more power! I need to devour more! Give me that device!" Guess that answers if it can use all the aliens in the Omnitrix. Yes, Ben, it appears it's not able to use all the aliens. However, we still do not know which ones it can nuke before Rook could finish a sentence. There was a loud crash and both Rook and Ben were knocked aside as the creature used one of Cannonbolt's attacks to get closer to the pair. Luckily for Ben, he rolled up into a ball and landed safely from the force of the impact before coming back and attacking the creature. Both Ben and the creature used a rolling attack at each other, and the shockwave caused Rook to duck for cover, as both Pelotarians seemed to be evenly matched. That was until the creature did something unexpected. As it was spinning and holding Ben at bay, two tendril-like arms came out from its sides and grabbed the sides of Ben's version of Cannonbolt, slowing his roll down until it completely engulfed him in a goo-like form. "Ben! Ben, can you hear me?" cried Rook. After getting no response from Ben, Rook decided to call for backup. Just then, the form of the creature went flying past in front of Rook's view. Rook looked in surprise and turned his head in the direction to where Ben had been and saw he was spinning on the spot in a sideways motion. It seems this had caused the creature to be sent flying away from Ben and crashing into some of the rocks. "I need more power," said the creature, and with that it began to change shape and form into another one of Ben's original aliens. After several weeks of travelling from Cybertron to Earth, Megatron finally entered the solar system. From the exterior of the spaceship, all seemed as if it was calm and peaceful. However, inside, things were far from peaceful. Although there'd been some infighting of the Decepticons, the infighting this time was a lot more hectic. This was because most of the crew had become venomized by the hybrid Cybertronian symbiote from Shockwave's experiment on Starscream, using the DNA of the Clintar and its host, Venom. We joined Megatron, Soundwave and Shockwave on the bridge of the starship, where the venomized Predacons, Insecticons, Starscream and a few other Decepticon warriors were trying to take over the rest of the crew in one attack. Megatron was firing his cannon at the entrance to the bridge, while Soundwave created a steady stream of a sonic pulse, keeping the attacking Decepticons at bay. Starscream shouted at Megatron, "Soon you'll be one of us, Lord Megatron. Then I shall rule the new form of the Decepticons, with you as my servant, grovelling beneath my feet. In your dreams, Starscream, I will crush you and mount your head as a trophy on my wall. It's a warning for all those who dare defy me," replied Megatron. "Shockwave, what's the meaning of this? You said the altered creature was under your control." Lord Megatron, it seems that some of the creature's will was passed into the hybrid. Fascinating. Shockwave, what use is this power if it cannot be controlled? Lord Megatron, I have a theory, but it's only as such. If the will of the host is greater than that of the hybrid creature, it is reasonable to assume that the creature will be under the host's control, and not the other way around, as it appears in the case with Starscream and the others. How do we test this theory of yours, Shockwave? I am yet to come to a conclusion for the solution to that, Lord Megatron. For your sake, Shockwave, you had better, and soon. Yes, Lord Megatron. Soundwave, Megatron shouted. How much longer can you hold them back?
Less than half a megacycle.
The situation looked bleak for Megatron, Soundwave and Shockwave. Although Megatron has been in situations far worse than this and always come out on top, not only because of his stubbornness, which helped him when he was a gladiator before the war on Cybertron begun, but because he would do anything to ensure his survival. Just then, the systems on the spaceship announced that they will reach Earth in the next Mega Cycle. Upon hearing this, Megatron was more determined to survive than ever, as he was close to reaching Earth, and with it, his goal to end this stalemate with Optimus Prime and the Autobots once and for all. We need to put a stop to this right now, Shockwave. You best have something to tell me by now. Lord Megatron, I theorized that by boosting the control device on your arm, we can immobilize the infected crew members, making them open to an attack for a few cycles. Excellent. How long? I need but a few moments, Lord Megatron. Then do it, before I turn you to scrap metal. Yes, Lord Megatron. With that, Shockwave boosted the signal and power of the control device on Megatron's arm. Megatron looked towards Starscream and began to smile with a menacing grin on his face, lifted his arm and pressed the button on the control device. What are you smiling about? With that, Starscream was frozen mid-sentence, and could see in his optics that the other Venomized Decepticons were also frozen in their tracks. What's going on? Thought Starscream. I must move. I must take out Megatron and claim my place to rule over all the Decepticons. After seeing the infected Decepticons stop moving, Soundwave stopped the sonic pulse in order to recover. Just as he stopped the pulse, Megatron began to walk to Starscream with a sinister look on his face. Well, 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 Starscream. It appears that once again you have failed me. Even as a test subject, you are still weak and pitiful. To think that the self-proclaimed mighty Starscream can't even keep the traces of a pathetic organic creature's will from taking him over. If it wasn't for the fact that you have the original version of this hybrid creature bonded to you, I would turn you into scrap right now. I will take pleasure in Shockwave using you as a subject in his experiments. Perhaps he will dissect you and I can use your leftovers to decorate my wall. With that, Starscream's rage had an unexpected result. Megatron's goading of Starscream had caused him to become more and more enraged. This led to the joined subconsciousness of Starscream and the hybrid symbiote becoming a bit more synchronized. Despite being immobilized, the rage felt by Starscream enabled a single action that caught Megatron off guard. As Megatron got close to Starscream, to finish gloating in his face, a tendril shot out and hit the control device of Megatron's arm. This caused the device to spark and malfunction. At the same time, the hybrid symbiote took advantage to cling to the rest of Megatron's arm. What's the meaning of this? Soundwave, send a sonic pulse at me now to get this thing off me. But it was too late. The hybrid symbiote had started to bond with Megatron's Cybertronian DNA, and soon Megatron was engulfed in a cocoon of the symbiote. With this, the infected Decepticons were once again able to move, and Starscream, who had seen everything, shouted out loud, "Finally, Lord Megatron, you are now under my control. Finally, it's my turn to rule. Bow before your new master," proclaimed Starscream as he sat in the command seat of the bridge. All this time, Megatron was still enclosed in the cocoon. As the spaceship entered Earth's orbit, Starscream ordered Soundwave and Shockwave to land the Earth in the desert, near where the Autobots were last reported to have been seen. Reluctantly, Shockwave and Soundwave began to bring the spaceship into Earth's atmosphere and landed somewhere in the desert. Starscream let out a laugh, feeling pleased with himself, before turning to look at the cocoon of Megatron. That's odd. How come Megatron hasn't come out yet? He should by now be under my control and converted into one of the hybrid Decepticons. Just then, Starscream jumped back in shock and fear from the cocoon. What? What's going on? What was that? And the room filled with a laugh that sent a fear into Starscream's spark. So, Starscream, you think you are in charge and the new ruler of the Decepticons? Megatron? What's going on? You should be under my control. Why do I feel fear from the cocoon? Just then, the cocoon began to break and Megatron emerged. He looked the same as he did before, and Starscream was a little confused. You didn't change. What's going on? How come you're still the same as before? As Megatron stepped forward and smiled at Starscream, he said, "Oh, but Starscream, I've made this power my own, and unlike you, I have full control over this creature." With that, Megatron smiled as he began to transform into his new venomized form. A form that was far more terrifying than any of the other infected Decepticons. Starscream looked in terror as he realized that the fear he felt was because Megatron had mastered this new power, and he could sense as Megatron was changing, he felt compelled to serve and follow Megatron's orders without questioning them. Even if he wanted to resist, the creature bonded with him would follow Megatron's orders without fail. We continue our story on Earth. Megatron, along with the Venomized Decepticon warriors, departed the spaceship and were headed towards the location of the Ark, where Optimus Prime and the Autobots were based. On their travels, Megatron noticed what looks like signs of a battle had happened within the desert area. Soundwave turned to Megatron and said, "There are concentrated gamma readings in this area. It matches readings of the organic agents known as the Hulks on this planet, advising caution." Megatron looked at Soundwave and ordered the Decepticons to continue advancing. At this point, Teletron 1 had picked up the Decepticons' ship and announced that Megatron and a large number of Decepticon warriors had arrived and were heading towards the Ark. Hearing this, Optimus Prime ordered the Autobots to roll out and intercept Megatron before he reaches the Ark. Optimus Prime, Hot Rod, Bumblebee, and the Dinobots headed out towards the Decepticon army. Optimus Prime also sent out a call for Blaster and several Autobots who were not in the base to meet them, as Megatron had arrived on Earth. Megatron's arrival had not gone unnoticed on Earth, and one of Earth's greatest defenders of creatures from across the multiverse and other worlds, the Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Strange, had detected the strange energy Megatron had let off as he exited the cocoon while in Earth's orbit. Upon noticing the threat, Doctor Strange sent out a message to the heroes of Earth to gather in the desert area to combat this threat. This was a simple spell for the Sorcerer Supreme that allowed him to communicate with the heroes he had encountered before. After sending the message, Doctor Strange began to prepare for the upcoming battle. He no longer had the Time Stone, but was able to perform amazingly powerful spells as his skills had continued to develop. Meanwhile, back in the desert, Megatron and his army had come into view of Optimus Prime and the Autobots. "Finally, we will end this, Prime," shouted Megatron. Optimus Prime transformed from his vehicle mode and shouted, "Megatron, one shall stand, one shall fall." With that, the Decepticons had opened fire on the Autobots, and a massive battle ensued. As the blasts were going back and forth in the ensuing chaos, it was picked up by the news crews of Earth, and the chaos was transmitted worldwide. This caused all the Venomized heroes and villains to start heading towards the desert area. Although, even if it wasn't televised, these heroes and villains and the Venomized members on Earth would have headed that way as if drawn by some strange urge or desire. While they were travelling to the desert, the battle was getting more and more intense, with both sides at what seemed to be a stalemate. In order to break the stalemate, Megatron ordered the Decepticon warriors to transform to show their new power. With that command, the Decepticon warriors stopped firing for a few cycles and they all changed into the Venomized forms. "What's going on, Optimus? They've changed to some weird creature." Before Bumblebee could say another word, he was shocked when his optics saw Optimus Prime also change into a strange, similar creature along with Hot Rod. "Optimus? Prime!" shouted Megatron. "How is it you also have this form? Why is it so hard to kill you? Decepticons, attack!" Megatron had noticed the Autobots seemed to have less converted warriors, and Megatron decided to press forward and take advantage of the situation. Just as the two forces were about to clash properly for the first time, both were sent flying backwards by some strange force. "What the Prime? What sorcery is this? What did you do?" "What did I do? It wasn't me. What did you do, Megatron?" Just then, strange glowing sparks began to fill a spot in the air. The sparks grew into a circle and a port opened with a figure floating through it. "Well, I must admit you are right. It is sorcery, but it wasn't Optimus Prime who did it." "Another strange organic," thought Megatron. "That's almost right, Megatron. But the name's Strange. Doctor Strange." "What? How did you know what I was thinking? I must eliminate this one immediately. It's too dangerous to let him live." In the next moment, Megatron changed into his Venomized form and fired an energy blast at Doctor Strange. As the blast hit, Doctor Strange was in the middle of chanting a spell. Normally, this wouldn't have been a problem, but the changed energy from the Cybertronian symbiote bonded with Megatron had an unexpected effect on impact. There was a loud explosion, and as the dust was settling, Optimus Prime and Megatron could see the shadowy figure of Doctor Strange. They both shot a tendril in their Venomized forms at the figure they saw. Both Prime and Megatron looked at each other, wondering who had been successful in adding the Sorcerer Supreme into the member of their ranks. As the dust settled, Megatron and Optimus Prime both looked in confusion. Optimus could only utter one phrase: "By the Allspark." Megatron meanwhile shouted, "What's the meaning of this?" To their disbelief, there were two Doctor Stranges. Both had been hit by one of the Venomized tendrils that had been shot in from either side. The two sorcerers looked at each other, they started to cast a spell, they both started to turn into Venomized forms. One looked similar to Optimus with the standard blue colour of a Venom symbiote, with the white design on his chest. The other looked purple in colour, similar to Megatron, but with some Cybertronian symbols on them, which is different than the other Decepticons. These symbols were on the arm and the body of the character. And there's also a strange third eye on the face. The two Venomized sorcerers looked at each other and began their magical battle. We left the last battle with two Venomized forms of Doctor Strange battling each other after Megatron had sent a blast during a spell that was being casted, and both sides had sent their symbiotes into a cloud dust to venomize Doctor Strange and add him to their ranks. Now, both of the Venomized Sorcerer Supremes had begun a magical battle that had made the previous fights look insignificant. It appeared that the two sorcerers were evenly matched, and since they were both from one being, they were able to anticipate each other's attacks and moves. The battle was at a stalemate, with neither side giving any headway in the conflict. Realising that they were evenly matched, and this would be a long battle, both versions of Doctor Strange raised their hands in the air after making some distance, and a large portal appeared above them, opening up to what would appear to be two different worlds. One looked like it was covered in ice and Arctic and chilly frost and breeze with strange creatures. The other was a form of underwater world with strange sea monster type creatures. You wouldn't know this just by looking at the portals, but they're actually both from the same world, a distant planet in the far reaches of the universe, a planet known as 4546b, a world that was not only infected by a strange bacterium, inhabited with a large array of creatures that were both deadly and monstrous in their size. While both sides looked in awe, and Optimus Prime and Megatron both wondered what was going on, Megatron, with a bit of an insane smile on his face, revelled at the power he had added to his side. All of a sudden, the Doctor Strange with the Cybertronian symbiote raised his hand to the portal and fired several tendrils into it, hitting creatures within the frozen landscape. The sound of the creatures roaring as the tendrils hit them and they began to become venomized echoed throughout the desert where our two sides were gathered. The loudest cry came from a creature that looked to be frozen in the ice and motionless. It was thought that this creature was dead until the symbiote had hit its skin and started to bond with its DNA. This creature seemed different from most of the other creatures on the planet. This giant creature was covered in several green pustules on its body. Although this was something that was far from the minds of both sides, as the symbiote tendril had cocooned the creature and begun to change it. As the giant creature was changing, the symbiote seemed to grow green pustules all over it. In all the commotion, it had gone unnoticed that this creature had what looked to be a form of infection. However, this was something that the Doctor Strange and Megatron side had noticed, and one of the reasons why this creature selected to join the ranks. The symbiote cocoon on the creature went purplish in colour, with a slight red tint to it, similar to Megatron's venomized form, however lacking any Cybertronian markings. As it emerged from the cocoon, its figure was similar to how it was before in shape and size, with a few notable differences. The armoured plate on the back had changed from curved to sharp spikes. The body had more green pustules on it, including on the creature's large, long tongue. There was a white pattern along its body, and what appeared to be green stripes on its tail, the same green colour as the pustules. As the creature opened its mouth wide with a roar before charging towards the portal to come through, Bumblebee, who had been speechless the whole time, turned to Optimus and said, Optimus, how are we going to handle that thing? It's large enough to eat us whole. Fear not, my friend. This is far from over, replied Optimus. At that moment, the ground shook with an almighty thud as the creature had come through the portal and landed on the ground between the two Sorcerer Supremes. As it raised its head and looked at Optimus Prime and the Autobots, it appeared to smile and lick its long tongue across what could only be described as its lips. At the same time, a group of symbols started to glow on its body as a spell was cast by the Doctor Strange who had summoned it. Megatron now had a new warrior on his side, tipping the balance on this battle in his favour, a Frost Leviathan. Not one to panic when faced with the weird and magical. The Doctor Strange on Optimus Prime's side cast a spell which created a large gap between the two opposing forces and the Frost Leviathan creature, and created a crater. Before anyone realised what was going on, gallons of water came shooting out of the portal until it filled the crater, making a giant lake. "What's the meaning of this?" shouted Megatron. Just then, a huge roar could be heard, but there was no creature in sight. The roar came from within the newly formed lake. Both sides seemed confused. Neither had seen any sign of a creature coming through the portal, unless it was hidden within the water that came through. All of a sudden, the frozen Leviathan began to raise up on its hind legs and stomp down on the ground in an extremely aggressive manner. Although it was under the control of Megatron, this creature was extremely territorial and aggressive. The only thing holding the creature from attacking the Decepticon army was the link Megatron had to overpower it using his will. It wasn't too long before a large serpent-like figure could be seen under the surface of the water, winding back and forth as it investigated the edges of the lake. Each time the creature came near an edge, there was a loud roar. It seemed it was using the roar as a form of echolocation, and the creature was swiftly covering the whole area of the lake before it stopped almost dead center, and a large blackish blue mass rose to the surface. It was a cocoon, or what appeared to be a giant oval-shaped mass. The movement under the water's surface and the roars from the creature had stopped. All of a sudden, while both sides were silent, there was a loud ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. The noise was steady and in the rhythm of a heartbeat, causing the water to ripple with the large mass at its center. Optimus, what's going on? At this point, Bumblebee couldn't believe his circuits. All the events that had unfolded. He thanked the Allspark that he was unharmed in the chaos that had ensued so far, while at the same time, he was on edge, not knowing what was going to happen next in this battle. Suddenly, there was a cracking sound, and a large spike-like mandible came out of the cocoon, followed by another and another, until there was 4 showing, and they looked like a strange tower-like structure sticking out of the top of the cocoon. As both sides watched on, Megatron turned to Shockwave and said, "Shockwave, what is this thing?" Before Shockwave could answer, the cocoon exploded, and the casing became organic and started merging with the creature as a bellowing roar echoed through the sparks of the two armies. The creature appeared larger than the Frost Leviathan due to the length of its body, but this creature didn't have any green pustules on it. 3 horn-like shapes on its head and sharp spines on the cross-shaped tail. The venomized creature joining the battle this time was known as a Reaper Leviathan. As the roar from the venomized Reaper Leviathan echoed throughout the battlefield, the Frost Leviathan dived into the water and charged at its new threat. Noticing this, the Reaper Leviathan also started to charge, and both creatures were set for a head-on collision. As the two creatures collided, the shockwave caused by the impact of these two behemoths sent waves crashing to all sides of the lake. The scene before Megatron and Optimus Prime was unlike anything they had seen before. Never had the two seen titans of an organic nature battling it out. The best way to describe the scene was if you were watching 2 kaijus fighting in the water. Tendrils were flying back and forth between the two. The contest of raw strength and power was a stalemate. Even though the Frost Leviathan had a larger, bulkier frame to it, the serpent-like shape of the Reaper Leviathan enabled it to wrap around its opponent and keep it at bay as it continued to attack. Both sides were impaling each other with the spikes from their bodies. None of these two titans were given any ground in the battle, despite the constant barrage of attacks. One reason for this was the symbiotes, now bonded with their DNA, were healing the wounds as fast as they were being made. While watching this battle, Megatron was looking for a chance to take advantage of the situation. He noticed Optimus Prime and the Autobots had lowered their guards slightly while watching the events that were unfolding. All of a sudden, Megatron ordered his warriors to attack. "Attack! Destroy the Autobots!" With this, the Decepticon army began to rush at the lake and headed for the Autobots. Some changed into their aerial forms and began to fly over the lake. Others entered the waters and headed across the lake, all the while watching the Titans stay clear of the standoff that was happening between the two Leviathans. Optimus Prime noticed the attack and ordered the Autobots to prepare for battle. Just then, Doctor Strange on Optimus Prime's side created a chain from magic and stopped the Autobots from advancing. Before Optimus Prime could ask what's going on, Doctor Strange pointed out towards the lake, where the Decepticon warriors were being pulled down one by one and screaming in fear as they were dragged beneath the water surface. "What's the meaning of this? Prime!" shouted Megatron. All of a sudden, some tendrils that looked to be charged with energy came out of the water and wrapped around one of the Decepticon warriors. As this warrior started to blast the tendrils with little effect, a large set of teeth began to emerge from out the water towards the warrior, who shouted out loud, "Save me, Lord Megatron!" Before he could finish the sentence, the Decepticon warrior had been swallowed whole by the creature. All that was left were a few bits of scrap floating on the water's surface. This creature turned away and submerged, leaving a brief view of the top of its fin before disappearing under the water in a terrifying burst of speed. The only thing left were a few ripples on the water's surface from where the sides of the creature had been. This creature was clearly not on the Decepticon's side, and had also been fused with a symbiote. How and when this creature came through the portal, and how and when it got a symbiote, it was unknown. Perhaps in the chaos of the two Leviathans fighting, it seemed that the odds had turned in the favour of Optimus Prime and the Autobots as the number of Decepticons started to dwindle. That was until the Frost Leviathan did something unexpected. It shot a tendril with a pustulate on it at the creature, attacking the Decepticon warriors. As it hit the creature, it started to become infected, and its speed decreased in the water. It would appear that the Frost Leviathan, under Megatron's control, has the ability to infect other creatures and cause harm to them. As for the creature that was infected, the squid shark that had been venomized, it began to look like it was on its last legs. Even though there was a world-changing battle taking place, and news crews were reporting about the incident all over the world, there was one place that was oblivious to the events unfolding. Beneath the streets of New York, a band of brothers with a rather unusual father had just returned from battling in Dimension X against Krang and Shredder. These two mortal enemies of our heroes had managed to escape through a dimensional portal and were most likely somewhere on Earth. However, before they escaped, our heroes managed to stop their giant mobile fortress, the Technodrome, along with a large army of foot and rock soldiers, from coming through and taking over the city. You're probably wondering who our heroes are. Well, they're a group of 4 brothers who have been training in the ninja arts almost all of their life. The only thing is, though, these brothers are turtles. That's right, they're Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and their origin story is a bit of a long one. Well, in short, they're exposed to a chemical compound from this company called TGRI years ago. It was a mutagenic compound, and it changed and altered their forms to be more human-like in appearance. It was at the same time that the Turtles returned that April O'Neil from Channel 6 News, one of the few humans who knew about their existence, showed up in the lair and asked the guys if they had any idea about what was going on. She mentioned that she was going to go with Channel 6 News, and if she can get there in time, report live from the scene. The first turtle to speak to April was Leonardo, or Leo for short. He was the eldest brother and the leader of the team. "April, what's going on in the desert? We just got back from dealing with Shredder and Krang in Dimension X. This is the first we're hearing about this." April turned on the TV to one of the news channels reporting the coverage. The turtles looked in amazement at the footage of this epic climactic battle going on. Mikey, who as usual wasn't really paying much attention, turned to the TV and blurted out, "Awesome, what's this? Some kind of monster movie?" Everyone turned and looked at Mikey, and Raph, while shaking his head, said, "Does it look like a monster movie, you knucklehead?" With a completely vacant look on his face, Mikey turned to Raph and said, "Well, yeah." The next thing Mikey knew, a ton of empty pizza boxes were getting thrown at him. Leo shook his head and turned back to April and asked her what was going on. After discussing the scenes on the TV of the battle between the Autobots and Decepticons, everyone was in shock when they saw giant sea creatures appear out of thin air and start battling it out in the middle of a lake that had suddenly formed. April set off for the Channel 6 newscopter, saying that she'll catch up with the guys later, ignoring their warnings that it could be dangerous. Leo wanted to find Master Splinter, their father. He wanted to ask some advice on the decision if they should follow April or take part in this battle that seems that it could, sooner or later, reach their home. Raphael thought they should follow April and wanted to storm off after her. But Leo wanted to make the decision with Master Splinter. Raph's short temper and lack of patience were starting to get to him, and he stormed off, mumbling to himself, as he bumped into Donatello on the way out.
Leo knew how Raph felt. He too wanted to go after April and make sure she was okay. However, this decision was too big for him to make alone. You see, the turtles had spent years and years learning the ninja arts, and one of the key things they were taught was to stay hidden and not show themselves in public. There were very few people within New York who knew about their existence, and this decision was far too big to make on his own. Leo headed to try and find Splinter, but it was odd. Splinter was not in his room, and he rarely left the lair, let alone the sewers. Leo looked around to see if there were any clues as to where Splinter had gone, but he couldn't see any in his room, so he went to the training area. While in the training area, Leo saw what looked like a black ooze-like substance in a corner. He went over to have a closer look, and he thought he saw it move, but he couldn't tell if it was a trick of the light. "Hey guys, do you see this?" Leo looked around and no one was there. He remembered that Raph had gone to cool down somewhere in the sewers, and Donnie and Mikey were watching the battle unfold on the news, interested in those events. Leo turned back around, and as his gaze met with the black-like ooze, it launched at him. Several tendrils then shot out and stuck to his chest and the rest of his body. It started to engulf and envelop him. Bit by bit, it travelled up his arms. Leo tried to fight back before letting out a scream that echoed throughout the lair. In a matter of moments, he was completely engulfed by this black ooze. After a few more moments, the ooze began to form into a more solid creature. He started to look a bit more like Slash, however, more creepy and scarier. It was at this point Donatello and Raphael came charging in after hearing the scream from Leo. They were met by a strange creature-like version of Leonardo, stood there with his swords drawn. The first to enter the room was Donatello. He stopped mid-dash in shock. Leo, is that you?" The strange creature replied. "We are Venom." What? Venom? "Hey, Donnie, what was that? Was that Leo?" I think so, but I've no idea what's happened to him. If we can capture him, maybe I can study him and find a way to change him back." Raph and Donatello looked at each other and drew their weapons. As they looked back at Leo, he launched at them. Raph blocked the swords using his size, and Donnie used his staff to knock the venomized version of Leo back across the room. "Yuck, what is this stuff? It's on my staff!" At that moment, Donatello looked and realized that the black ooze-like substance left on the staff was slowly trying to make its way up closer and closer to him. "Watch out for that black stuff. It seems to be sentient." "You mean that thing's alive? What the shell? Hey Donnie, any ideas? We need to restrain it. It looks like the ooze that's flowing is alive. Don't let it touch you. We don't know what will happen." Raph and Donatello continued to fight with Leo, but it was a standoff. After a few minutes of fighting, Donatello and Raphael were getting more and more exhausted, while Leo didn't seem tired at all. "Hey Donnie, you got any ideas? At this rate, we're not going to be able to restrain him." It was at that point Raphael made a decision. He decided, in order to restrain Leonardo, he would throw his sides at him and cause him to dodge them. As Leonardo jumped to the side out the way, Raphael grabbed him from behind to hold him and restrain him. "Raph, what are you doing? Just knock him out now. I can't hold him much longer." With that, Donatello jumped up in the air and swung his bow staff down as hard as he can, hitting Leo square bang in the center of his head. Leo fell down unconscious, started to change back to his regular form. "Hey Raph, we did it!" Raph? It was at this point Donatello looked over to where Raph had been and noticed standing where Raph was a completely venomized version. Raph had also become infected. Stood in front of him is the now venomized form of Raphael, with long red tendrils coming out the top of his head and spikes on his shell. Donatello looked back at Leonardo, who was still unconscious for a second, and said, "Oh, shell." With Leo unconscious and Raph now venomized, Donatello was already feeling exhausted. He could only think that he had to get out of there and get out of there quick. Find Mikey for help and see what they can do. Donatello made a quick exit, and as he was running away, he glanced back to see what was happening. He saw a couple of tendrils shoot out from Raphael and pick up the size before Raphael knelt down and helped Leonardo up. It would appear that Leonardo was only knocked out for a few moments after being hit on the head extremely hard. This meant Donatello needed to figure out some way
to restrain not only Leo, but Raph as well, before he can find a way to try and save his brothers. Donnie headed towards where Mikey was last seen, in front of the TV where the news events were unfolding. As he got closer to where the TV was, Donnie realised that the creatures looked rather similar to the infected Leo and Raph. He was sure this wasn't a coincidence. As he was figuring things out in his head, he decided to make a run for his lab while shouting out for Mikey. Mikey! Mikey was nowhere to be found. Where is he? Of all the times for him to do a disappearing act, Donatello only had one choice. He headed to his lab in the hopes of finding or putting something together that could help him restrain his brothers Leo and Raph, who, at this point, were trashing the lair. They were going from room to room following Donatello, tendrils flying, knocking things over, and pretty much destroying the place. Raph and Leo's tendrils opened the fridge and left a bit of symbiote on a pizza slice that had been left in there, and then they shut the fridge afterwards before continuing to trash the living room. As they passed the TV and saw the other venomized creatures on the news, they looked at each other and said, "We should make this fast. We are needed with the others. Yes, we should join the others as soon as we can, for we are Venom." Donatello was trying to put something together that could work to restrain the now venomized Leo and Raph, and he found a prototype sonic grenade he'd been working on. He was hoping he could use it as a distraction before firing a net from the net launcher he was just putting together to try and restrain his brothers. He didn't have to wait long. As he finished loading the net launcher, Raph and Leo entered the lab. Donatello threw the stun grenade, which made a few beeping sounds and had a few flashing lights, before it suddenly went quiet. Raph and Leo looked at each other with a smile on face before looking back at Donatello. They thought that the grenade was a dud. It was that moment that the grenade activated and sent out a sonic pulse, which caused pain to Leo and Raph in their venomized forms, causing them to curl over and scream out in agony. Donatello took the chance to fire the net launcher, covering the pair seconds before the grenade stopped its sonic pulse. It was at this point a tendril fired out and hit Donnie in the chest as his hands were full with the net launcher. Before he could do anything, the tendril started to shoot other tendrils out on his body. However, something strange happened. A couple of tendrils shot out and got a device from inside the lab, pulling it onto it and merging it in with the arm. Moments later, Donatello joined his brothers as the latest venomized turtle. The only one left now was Mikey. While all of this was going on, Mikey, also known as Michelangelo, had decided, even though it was fun watching the events on the news unfold in this monster movie, as he called it, he was getting hungry, and true to his nature, he wanted some pizza. He made a call for the pizza to be delivered. He decided it would be fun to do some sewer boarding on his way to get his favourite food. Luckily for Mikey, he left moments before Leo let out a loud scream. At this point, Mikey was so far away from the lair, he didn't hear it echoing. Completely oblivious to the events going on with his brothers, Mikey was thinking of how cool it was seeing giant robots and creatures battling it out on the news, as well as some magic happening. He started to daydream while he was boarding, imagining he had magical powers like he had just seen, and he was making stances and shouting out spells like Abracapizza as he was riding a skateboard. He was thinking how cool it would be if he could make pizza appear out of thin air. It wasn't too long before Mikey reached the delivery point, and he collected the pizzas. On his way back, he couldn't help being true to his nature of scarfing down a couple of slices as he sewer boarded his way back to the lair. Completely carefree, he got back to the lair and shouted, "Hey guys, I've got some pizza, come and get it!" But it was silent. Guys? No one's here. Oh well, more for me then. Mikey strolled into the lair and thought it looked a bit of a mess, not thinking too much of it. He wondered what had happened, but he was more interested in getting back to the TV and watching the news, or as he liked to call it, the monster movie. He jumped on the sofa and began to scarf down some more slices of pizza as he was getting more and more engrossed with the events happening in the desert. As time passed, he noticed that the rest of his brothers still weren't about. He wondered where they could have gone to. It was not like them to be gone for so long. He decided to look about the lair and see if he could find them, or his father, Master Splinter. He couldn't see any sign of his brothers or Splinter. Mikey was beginning to get worried at this point, as there was no signs of the rest of his family. And the more he looked, the more he realised
that the lair had actually been trashed and wasn't just looking a mess. It was at this point Mikey decided to try and search for the rest of his brothers. He got the remaining pizza and went to put it in the fridge. He headed towards the fridge and he opened it, putting the boxes in without paying too much attention. As he went to close the fridge, the tendril that was in there shot out at him and started to wrap around him. Mikey, in pure surprise, fell to the floor and started screaming, "Ah, it's eating me! It's eating me!" Moments later, the venomized form of Mikey stood up. 2 tendrils shot out, picking up a couple of pizza slices. He looked across to the TV, and it was at that moment he realised he had to go to where the battle was. He had a feeling his brothers were also heading to the battle. Thank you for taking the time to watch this extra long video for the Multiverse Story Arc from beginning to date. In the meantime, why not check out some of the other content on the channel? I've got turning things into dragons, I've got SCPs being venomized, and a whole bunch of wacky and bizarre and fun things. So be sure to check that out. I'll put a link to a couple on screen. Anyway, stay safe everybody. Catch you next time.